yet. So that's why we're not tubing. It's okay.
Yeah.
Ready on mine. I'm at your back.
Okay, you're ready?
Okay. Yeah, yes.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Northamptonshire Police, Fire and Crime panel for the 10th of December. First item on the agenda is apologies for non-attendance.
Through you, Chair, we have apologies for non-attendance from Mr. Robert Mahaffey.
Okay, we also have apologies from Councillor Andre Gonzalez-Savage. Yes, sorry, Mr. Mahaffey was the other one. Yeah, okay. Right, notifications of requests from members to the public. Do we have any?
We have received none, Chair.
Okay, thank you. On declarations of members' interest, I'm sure I don't have to really remind you, but I'm supposed to. You should declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in terms of items on the agenda that are not already listed on your register of interest. Council members are subject to requirements of their own council's code of conduct, and independent members are subject to the host's code of conduct. And you're reminded that if you have a DPI or significant NSDI in a matter to be discussed, whether it's registered or not, you must not take part in the debate or vote on that matter and remove yourself from the discussion, if not the room, whether you are a member of the panel or not. Okay. So moving on to Chair's announcements, I just ask you, not everyone has, but if you could mute your microphone when you're not speaking, because there's then no feedback. If you could also use your raise hand function. Now, I don't have a raise hand function because I've built the way it's set up, but if you don't know how to do that, if you click on participants and you get a list of all the participants up on the right hand side, and at the bottom there's a raise hand function. You could use that if you wish to speak. As you will know, I attended the annual conference of the Police, Fire and Crime panel, 23rd to the 25th of November, very interesting. And I thought, because I wanted to keep everyone abreast of that, I did do a report which has been circulated to you. And a couple of people have said that they thought that was quite interesting. Well, one of the items on the agenda was the AGM of the National Association. And as you may know, I was on the executive, I'm still on the executive as a result of that AGM. And in particular, I've taken on doing a survey of complaints, which I'm just about to compile. And also, one of the items we had was a forum for chairs to discuss any issues they had. And it was so successful that people have asked if we could do that as with the association organising one perhaps 6 months on from the conference, and I've been asked to organise that. So next on the agenda is the minutes of the previous police crime panel meetings. And first of all, we have the one for the 24th of September. I won't go through it page by page. I'm sure you've all seen it. Has anyone got any issues that they need to raise with regards to accuracy or any other items on it? We have somebody coming in. Okay. I can't see any hands up. Okay.
Chair, through you, we have a raised hand from Councillor Kane.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Kane. Yes.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Chair. Chair, yeah, just one point. I did put my apologies in for the 24th of September. I tried to get John McGee to replace me. I was self-isolating at the time because my son had COVID symptoms. So I put my apologies in for the 24th and John McGee, but they're not registered. So I'd be grateful if that could be amended, please.
I'm sure James will register that. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, so passing on to, then we had on the 2nd of October.
Sorry, Chair, just to, and again, as I started speaking, I realise you may be doing all the agreements at the end, but if on each set of minutes we could have a show of assent from the panel members, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Can we, if everyone's would like to say if they agree with the contents of the minutes or happy to agree it, can we have a show of hands? You can put your physical hand up if you want, so we can see everybody. Okay, I think that's everybody. Anyone against? No. Okay, so that's agreed. As I say, then we had the confirmation hearing, and that's in 2 parts, the public and the private. So if you wish to discuss anything that was in the private, please bear that in mind. It was in the private session. Can I have a show of hands of, or if there are any issues, please raise your hand. Okay, Councillor Pritchard, are you just raising your hand, or do you have an issue?
No, it was just in agreement.
Okay, sorry, I did 2 things at once. I shouldn't have done. Okay, all in agreement with the minutes then. Okay, Winston, you okay with that? Right, that's all in agreement for both. Is that both for the public and the private ones? I'm taking it as both. Okay, so we now move on to I can't find you. Fiona. Welcome, Fiona, and she's going to give an overview of voice, but first of all over to the Commissioner, who's going to introduce it.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chairman, as the panel's aware, I have the responsibility to provide services for victims and witnesses in the county. It's a statutory responsibility. I took the decision supported by the panel back in 2017 to establish a wholly owned company, Victims for Voice and Witnesses Limited, to provide this important, vital service. Basically, I didn't think it was appropriate that someone should make money out of victims. We were very lucky to poach Fiona Campbell to undertake the role of Chief Executive. She had, despite her youthful looks, had 29 years of experience with the Crown Prosecution Service, where she headed up the West Midlands Complex Case Unit, dealing with serious organised crime, and also responsible for the RASO unit, dealing with rape and serious sexual assault cases. She's responsible for a team of over 40 people who provide free, confidential support services for victims and witnesses of crime, life-changing fire incidents and serious road traffic collisions in Northamptonshire. Improving support to victims and witnesses is a key priority in my police and crime plan. And I've asked Fiona to provide you with an oversight and update on the work she and her colleagues at Voice have been undertaking to provide the support to people as they navigate through the complex world of the criminal justice system. I will hand over to Fiona. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you very much, Stephen. James, I believe you're operating the slides for me.
Yes.
If we could go to slide 1, and then when I want you to move on to the next slide, I'll say next slide, please. That's all right.
Certainly.
Yeah, lovely. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Well, as Stephen has said, obviously, you know, we've started in Voice, and it became a limited company in October 2017, and this arrangement enabled a degree of independence from the PCC and police, while providing a level of responsiveness and flexibility that the traditional contracts that were in place previously did not provide. The company focuses solely on delivering the best possible services for victims and supports delivery to our most vulnerable people in their moment of need. The approach also means that there is a single point of entry to victims of crime and enables needs assessments to be undertaken when necessary and onward referrals to specialist services can be provided. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what do we do? So Voice is actually a free and confidential support service for victims of witnesses of crime, life-changing fire incidents and serious road traffic collisions in Northamptonshire. Voice is available to anyone over the age of 6 and resident in Northamptonshire, whether the crime has been reported to the police or not, and regardless of when or where it happened. Voice does not deliver support to families affected by homicide, which is delivered by a national service provider, and child sexploitation cases and rape cases are excluded from the Voice service scope. We provide 5 tiers of support to victims and witnesses of crime. We provide immediate support, practical support, including the provision of personal and home security devices, regular ongoing emotional support with our team of specialist support workers, providing support to all core crime types and specialist crime types, including medium and standard risk domestic abuse and sexual violence. We provide access to specialist support, including counselling and trauma therapy for children and young people who have been affected by serious road traffic collisions and particularly crimes in respect of domestic abuse. We also support individuals through the court service through our witness care unit. We link with partner agencies to ensure the right support is available for everyone and offer help and guidance to anyone who has to attend court proceedings and promote involvement in the criminal justice system by informing people of their rights. We provide a restorative justice service to victims seeking to communicate the impact of a crime to the perpetrator of that crime. Can I have the next slide, please? Following the establishment of the business in 2017, all contract service provisions was transferred from the OPFCC office to Voice Limited for contract management. These include the contracts of specialist support services provided to the Children and Young People Service, specialist counselling and trauma therapy provision to those affected by the road traffic collisions, and the Specialist Independent Sexual Violence Advisory IDVA provision based at the county's Sexual Assault Referral Centre. This brings a more streamlined approach to victim care and further progresses us towards that single point of entry for all victims and witnesses, and allowing for a strengthened degree of control over contract management. The contract of our children and young people provision was wholly delivered externally to Voice when the company went live. The triage of referrals was brought in-house to Voice so we could control all incoming referrals for all Voice services. We now direct all CYP referrals to our internal introductions and case management team, again progressing further towards the single point of entry model originally desired and allowing for greater control over performance information, reporting and needs and risk assessments. The previous service for Voice under victim support contract had been delivered using a heavily volunteer-led model with an expensive management structure. During the transitional process in 2P, a volume of paid and volunteer staff exited the service. A new delivery model was developed, focusing on an alternative management model and increasing the volume of paid staff, allowing for increased accountability, increased performance management, resilience, and increased compliance with renewed service level standards. Have the next slide, please. When comparing data on the timeliness of initial contacted attempts from 2017 to 18, a clear increase in contract compliance was evident. Under the victim support contract, an average of 68.5% of victims were being contacted within 48 hours between April and July 17. After the establishment of Voice, an average of 96.5% of victims were contacted within 48 hours between April and July 2018. Can I have the next slide, please? During the first full reporting year of 2018-19, the Adult Service for Voice received a total of 11,090 referrals. In 2019-20, we saw over 35,000 referrals into the adult service, with a combined total of 40,383 referrals across the 4 service provisions of adult, children and young people, road harm and restorative justice, following a move to become joint data controllers from Northamptonshire Police in May 2019. So that basically means we didn't have to rely on the police officer asking the victim if they consented to sharing their details with us, but they were automatically able to transfer that data through to us. So in the first 2 quarters of this year and during COVID, we have already received over 23,000 referrals across the 4 services. The first year of service, when we were established, was spent concentrating on building the Voice family, recruiting the right people into posts, training and developing our staff, and increasing the quality of service being provided. Service standard pledges were developed in the witness care team and the adult service team, which staff committed to delivering. Can I have the next slide, please? Last year, despite the significant increase in referral volumes into our service and following becoming joint data controllers, our team attempted initial contact with those valid referrals within 48 hours of receipt in 75% of cases. For those contacted, just over 4% of victims accepted some form of support, equating to 1,678 individuals, and our team sent almost 16,000 letters and emails informing victims of the services we offer. Approximately 34% of referrals where successful telephone contact was achieved, but they declined any form of support from us, but received our contact information for future reference if they required it. If we were unable to successfully contact clients by phone, they would then receive a letter or email if it was safe to do so. Can I have the next slide, please? Of those victims accepting support with our service, over 50% required ongoing emotional support, and our staff and volunteers held almost 4,000 support sessions, totaling almost 3,000 hours of emotional support being provided. Do I have the next slide, please? Of those clients who received regular ongoing emotional support, 81.4% reported improvements in their health and well-being. 88.21% said they were now better able to cope, and almost 81% felt safer, and 78.8% felt more supported. Clients who completed our service user survey, who may or may not have received support from Voice but had received some form of contact, reported in 100% of returns the contact was supportive and sensitive, and 94.5% were satisfied or very satisfied with the overall service received, with the other 5.5% having no opinion. Could I have the next slide, please? This is just a snapshot of some of the great comments that we have received. Could I have the next slide, please? So during those first couple of years, we have taken great strides to develop the service, taken contract control of the specialist services provided, allowing us to have greater oversight of the quality of the service being provided. Key performance reporting and the value for money has been achieved. We have increased our profile by providing training across the county, attending events and having a full comms strategy, including establishing strong referral links and service level agreements with the likes of Early Help, the NHS, East Midlands Ambulance Service, the Fire Service and GP services. We have introduced a high level of service standard by way of pledges that all staff have committed to. A carefully considered training budget each year has allowed for us to ensure that all staff are trained to appropriate standards. Specialist support workers have undertaken in-depth training to provide that specialist emotional support. Restorative justice practitioners are certified practitioners, and we have had great success in supporting our own staff to develop through the service, as well as becoming an attractive employment proposition to excellent qualified external applicants. We have been able to support the funding of an additional CHIDFO post within the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, and we have continued to strive to be that single point of entry by developing efficient online smart form referrals for professionals and victims alike who may not have reported their crimes to the police. Could I have the next slide, please? We have introduced many technical advances also on our journey since 2017. Voice has a well-established web and social media presence, and following, as mentioned earlier, we have introduced online service user surveying to capture feedback and satisfaction information and smart forms for direct referral professionals and victims online. A voice support hub app has been developed for free and can be downloaded by victims who may seek alternative forms of support and information. And a recent non-violence resilience support app has been launched to provide advice and guidance and support to the increasing volumes of parents suffering abuse from their children. We will shortly be introducing further advances with the dynamic dash for improved efficiency on referrals into MARAC and the IDVA service, and a dynamic needs assessment for victims who are unable to complete a needs assessment during our working hours. That can be completed at leisure at home from the comfort of their sofa once the children are safely tucked up in bed. Could I have the next slide, please? So this year, from April to date, we have received 27,049 referrals. All of our staff are working from home and have been provided with laptops, telephone headsets and pop-up desks. We have had a limited amount of staff in the office who are responsible for ensuring the hundreds of letters per day are sent out. And our support workers are having their support sessions online through video for those clients. Can I have the next slide, please? So one of the most significant changes to our service occurred in October 2019 when the county's partnership funded IDVA service, the Sunflower Centre, and the county's multi-agency risk assessment conference, MARAC administration team were integrated into the Voice family with staff 2p and across. For several years, funding into the services have remained static and at a level whereby the service was not resourced or staffed to adequate safe levels in accordance with Safe Life standards. For some time prior to integration, being co-located had allowed for Voice to assist in offering resilience to the Sunflower Centre in periods of needs, releasing Voice specialist support workers to assist in periods of low staffing, providing continuity of service provision for the highest risk domestic abuse victims in the county. Governance of the IDVA service transferred to the Voice Directors Board, and the integration has allowed for greater support and management of the services. At the point of integration, the IDVA service was significantly understaffed, and the Marek administration team faced delays, meaning significant volumes of cases were not being heard at Marek until several months after referral. The IDVA service and Marek administration teams are now resourced to safe line guidelines, and following a carefully planned recovery programme, there are no longer delays in Marek referral hearings, with referrals on average being listed within 4 weeks of referrals across the county. Our commitment to staff training and development means that all IDVAs within the Sunflower Centre are accredited practitioners or due to undertake their training. In addition, Voice has provided funding to support the ongoing provision of a Children and Young Persons ISVA within the county's Sexual Assault Referral Centre to provide much needed resilience to the team of ISVAs providing support to sexual violence victims. We have recently successfully bid for additional grant funds following COVID-19. These have been used to support the increased volume of domestic abuse and sexual violence referrals, which has allowed Voice to start providing emergency packs to victims leaving abusive households, including essential toiletries, emergency replacement phones, provision of food vouchers and other essential items. That commitment evidenced in our most recent staff survey held in October this year, whereby 98% of staff and volunteers stated they were satisfied or very satisfied with the training and development that Voice offers them. 93.5% of staff said they felt proud to work for Voice, and almost 90% would recommend Voice as a great place to work. Next slide, please. These are some of the comments that were from the staff survey and that we've received over this period. Can I have the next slide, please? So the journey continues. For this year, we will strive to achieve Leading Lights accreditation for our IDVA service to truly become a centre of excellence. We will develop our comm strategy so we can widen our reach and become a household name in Northamptonshire. We will look to develop DA work programmes and continue to work closely with DA service providers in the county. We will seek to secure more sustainable longer-term funding for the IDVA and Marek services that are now part of the Voice team. We want to increase RJ referrals and support clients through those journeys. As you will see, a lot has been achieved over a short time frame, and I very much look forward to leading Voice on the journey ahead. Thank you for allowing me to present today. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Madam Chairman, I just had one point I wanted to make before you finish.
Yes, Sonny.
Before anyone asks it, the observant of you may have noticed the significant jump in victims. That was in the past, and Fiona referenced it. Such was the situation with Voice before Fiona took over it. Policing didn't trust it completely. Now, working with the new Chief Constable and Fiona, we were able to broker a deal where every victim is data shared between them, and that sounds boring, a joint data controller, but that actually is what it meant. So originally, there was only a percentage where police officers would ask if they would consent to their details in terms of support. Now, we didn't feel that that was the right thing to do, because actually, at that moment of stress, the last thing you probably want to think about is kind of a service. So allowing kind of Voices, the victims' data to be passed over. And for those that attended the presentation earlier, noticed that there were 40,000 victims and 40,000 referrals to Voice. So 100% were kind of being passed across, by the odd technical difficulty every now and then, Fiona? Yes. But actually that means that then they can all actually kind of get picked up. And in some respects, that gives a better outcome for Northampton Police in terms of its confidence, because actually, you've kind of got a specialist that's actually contacting them. So I didn't want someone to think, oh my God, it's gone from 10,000 to 40,000 victims in 1 year. They were always there, but those 30,000 never had the opportunity to be spoken to or supported.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that explanation. Before I pass that to the others, could you just a bit of clarification on, you said right at the beginning that rape and serious sexual cases were not referred to you. Is there, but then, and later on you said about other services, but is there some other service that deals with that because they're so specialist?
Yeah, so our Serenity, so our ISVA service, which we contract manage, have the referrals for rape. So it doesn't come directly into Voice, but the contract that we manage with the ISVA Serenity service, which comes under our umbrella now, has those direct referrals for rape. So they are the specialist rape support workers that deal with those. So, and then of course with homicide, there's a national provider that deals with all homicide cases. So those referrals go straight to that national provider and not to us.
Just on that, Jill, the contract that Fiona kind of manages on behalf of the OPFCC in that instance is Serenity, is something that's jointly commissioned. Well, I say jointly, we put a relatively small amount of money in it as PFCC. A large proportion of it is done with the NHS. We're actually very fortunate to partner with the NHS in this part of the world in Serenity. I probably can't say any more than that because I think it's up for probably new procurement, and that's worked really well. In addition to that, those of you who visited will know we also sought to provide some security to rape crisis in the county. So actually we make available in the building that we, I think I leased it, I don't think we bought that one, leased it to, on behalf of Voice, the top floor is available to rape crisis. So actually you've got, if you like, one building that you can kind of have those joint service, because ultimately Voice is that front door that then leads you to all the kind of services and is executing very well on that original vision that we have. I will shut up and let Fiona answer now.
That's all right.
Yeah, the other thing was that you mentioned right fairly near the beginning that there was only 4.15% uptake. Do you think it's because the others didn't need support, or were they just too traumatized to take you up? I just wondered if they were just not willing to talk to anyone because they just weren't in the right place, or.
I mean, we always will, make every attempt to contact victims, obviously. Some individuals don't respond. You can leave them a voice message, you can write to them, and some people, don't want to take up that offer. And of course, you can't make somebody take up an offer of support, even if it's in a really serious crime. But what we do find is that I think those with those particular significant needs do take up the offer. And generally, individuals will have a lot of different needs, as well as sometimes what's happened in the crime. But where we do have a very good take-up of offer is obviously in our road harm service. So that's where if a family have been bereaved because of road traffic accident, or have been seriously injured, or have indeed witnessed a really serious road traffic accident, perhaps has been, first on scene and given first aid, those individuals do seem to want to have some obviously further ongoing, and it's counselling and therapy that we provide there to those in respect of road harm. But if it's more core crime, if it's assault or burglary, a lot of individuals, particularly burglary victims, once they've spoken to one of our support workers, we can give them some reassurance. We can send out window shock alarms, we can send out door alarms, and give them that extra bit of just support, really. And we can also ask the police, to go around and check the premises and give any, crime prevention, to those individuals. So it's always very mixed, because obviously everybody is different and everybody needs a different level of support. So that's where it's really important that we do like the full needs assessments with individuals to understand not only what's happened in the crime, but wider what is going on in their life or family, so that we can get a really good understanding, you know, even health-wise, as to where they are, so that we can work with them in the most effective way.
Thank you. Richard, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. Just two small points. The first one on restorative justice. Now,
Yes.
we know, I think the evidence is irrefutable, especially with regard to preventing recidivism in youth offending, where they actually have offender-victim mediation, that sort of restorative justice conference. We also know there are quite good outcomes when it comes down to victims meeting adult offenders. Obviously, taking away domestic violence, because that is a very sensitive area for RJ.
Yeah.
Do you actually get many people that are willing to have a face-to-face meeting, or is it pretty much done virtually or through a letter?
So we have very few individuals that want to engage in restorative justice. We do have, I mean, all our staff, you know, we've got trained practitioners, but actually the numbers are very few. And I always say it's a bit like the stars aligning, because you have to have a perpetrator who has caused harm, who recognises they have caused harm and want to do something about that and put that right in some way. And then you've also got to have a victim, on the other hand, who is going to be open to some sort of dialogue with that perpetrator. And it doesn't need to be face-to-face, it can be a letter, it can be a shuttle process. There's lots of different ways that you can do it, but they are very few and far between. We have had, you know, a particularly good case that we did, where there was a prolific burglar, and he had a drugs habit, as many of them do, unfortunately, and that's why he was, you know, burglaring people's homes. And there was quite an elderly couple. He'd, you know, broken into their home and stolen her handbag and some money, basically. But this lady had worried for quite some time that, you know, he'd been watching the house, you know, where had he been in the house? Had he been all over the house, or, you know, not sure actually what had happened. And so they were able, there was a shuttle process involved in that. And he was able to say, you know, actually, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have done it. I really do apologise. But actually the window was open. I was straight into the kitchen, straight out with the handbag. I didn't go anywhere. But she'd built up that he'd been watching the house and probably been all over the place, which wasn't the case at all. But as I said, you know, they are few and far between. But we've just had someone who is possibly going to join us as a volunteer, who very sadly lost her son and his girlfriend through a road traffic incident back in 2014, but has done a lot of work around RJ and going into prisons, etc. And she would like to join the Voice team. So I actually spoke to her yesterday. And I think, you know, there is a lot more work and awareness raising that we can do. I mean, all of our correspondence that goes out to every single victim has in it about the restorative justice process, but very few do come back. But I think, you know, there is more communication that we can do to try and engage people in that process.
Yeah, Fiona, RJ's been going since the mid-1980s. Pretty much then took off in the early 90s. And I'm an RJ practitioner and trainer, so I would certainly offer up my services on a voluntary basis to conference and to prep if you need it. But more importantly, it's important to maintain that. I know it's part of the strength of the Conservative to be supporting these, especially an ex-COTS Conservative supporting RJ, but you only need one prolific offender to actually engage in that process, and you can stop an awful lot of crime. So it's just one of the tools in the tool bag, and I just hope that, although I know there isn't a great uptake for various reasons, that we don't lose it completely. My last point is with regard to the police and victims. One of the biggest challenges I've noticed in policing is that victims do not feel they know who the officer in the case is when it comes down to updates. There's a lot of frustration there. Are you finding that intractable problem at times getting better? In other words, do victims feel that they are at the centre of the investigation, that they do feel supported not only by the police but by the Police and Crime Commissioner's office? Do you see that beginning to change, or do you still think there's a lot of work to do?
I think it is changing, because basically the police have now put in a pilot, they've got a certain amount of staff that actually victims can ring into to find out the progress of their case. So I think victims will say sometimes that they haven't been updated and they don't know what's going on. But as I understand it, this new telephone line has gone in and victims are being notified. But again, there's been very little uptake of it. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
You know, in surveys they'll say, oh yeah, I wasn't updated, but actually you'll give them the information and actually the contact details, but then they won't phone in. But some of our victims will say to our specialist caseworkers, you know, that they haven't had an update, but then our specialist caseworkers will try and hunt the OIC down, as it were, and say, right, come on, let's you know, give us some information, what's going on here. So we do form, you know, that bridge, as it were, between victim and OIC as well.
I think that test and challenge is really important, but I'd also ask a favour from your organisation is to make sure the police are aware of this anecdotal evidence, because if the police think they've solved the problem, yet victims still feel they're not being kept updated, they don't really know what's going on, then the system is failing somewhere. But as long as they're aware, so I would just request that to be fed back to the police.
I mean, I sit on the victim and witness delivery board with the police, and you know, I had raised it previously as an issue, and I was given the information with regards to obviously this new you know, test that they're doing. And all of my support workers know that obviously if any victim is saying they haven't had an update, one, to contact the OIC, but also to contact their team leader, because actually we've got 2 individuals within the police that are leading on this work that we can feed those examples through. And indeed we have fed examples through where they've said they haven't been updated, but actually those examples are becoming less and less, which I think is a really good thing, because it shows that actually the communication from the police is getting better. I'm not saying it's perfect yet, but it's getting better.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jelly.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Fiona, for that presentation. I applaud everything that you're doing. I think this is just absolutely amazing. I guess that victims used to be called the forgotten people because there wasn't this type of support out there to help them when they'd been the victim of a crime or something like that. So I think all that you're doing is, you know, you can't put a price on what this support must mean to the people who have been victims. Just one question. You said that your support is there free for children or people 6 years and over. What happens to the victims under 6 years of age? Who deals with them?
No one. The reason for that is when we were developing our contract for children and young people, we used previously assist trauma care, and we now use the child psychology service.
Okay.
And it was in discussion with them that we agreed the age that we would support and provide that specialist counselling. And it was viewed by them that children under that age, really you can't provide counselling and support because they don't have the necessary cognitive skills yet.
Okay.
So, you know, and what we would do, obviously, if we had somebody that was very young, all of our referrals anyway have to go through early help. If, say, for example, there's domestic abuse. So, you know, if there was a child of a very young age that was in a, you know, witnessing domestic abuse, for example, and social services are involved, then obviously they would be doing some work to support that family and child. But for counselling provision, it needs to be over that age 6 range.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Shields, you're next. And then Judy Kane.
Good afternoon, Fiona.
Hello.
I was very impressed when I visited your premises on Voice and Sunflower. My question is about the pie chart you showed us earlier on. If I recall, there were almost like 50% of victims like to have your support, and the other 50% seem to, they don't want to carry on to have your support. Now, for this particular type group who do not want your support anymore, do you have like a time lapse for, say, you get back to in touch with them, say after 6 months or a year, just to see how their situation has improved or changed, or so like that you can close a case?
No, we do close the case. If somebody isn't engaging with us, we will close the case. But what we will also do is to make sure they have all of our information. And the offer is always open to an individual. If, for example, they've been burgled, you know, that's an easy example. They've been burgled and actually, no, they don't want any support at the moment, but thank you very much. We will always send them out, if they haven't already received it, a burglary pack from the police, and also our contact details. And within that, we always say, actually, you know, if you don't want our support at the moment, absolutely, that's fine, but please retain this. And actually, if you do want to come back to us, then obviously you're free to do so. So we will then, you know, the onus is on them to then contact us and come back, because sometimes you don't know what the impact of that crime is. Line. You might initially think you're fine, but say 6 months down the line, you know, something may have happened, the trial has, you know, taken place, if they caught somebody, and actually you're still having a little bit of difficulty in coming to terms with what's happened. That is always the offer. And of course, we do have the witness care team that do support victims and witnesses through the whole of the court process, and they provide support. But if we know that somebody is particularly vulnerable, again, they will be offered the emotional support with one of our specialist caseworkers that can also provide that whilst they're waiting for their trial to take place.
Now, Fiona, again, you show on your slide a huge increase only this quarter, like 20,000 call, or so on, approximately. Your staff, if I remember, in the beginning when we visited your office, you were understaffed at that time. You had difficulties. You had difficulties to recruit because, of course, it requires some specialist skill. What is the situation currently at the moment with the volume increasing and your staff who have the appropriate skill?
Yeah, I mean, we're in a very good position, actually. We're fully staffed at the moment. We've just gone out to advert because we've got a couple of people, one's joining the police service and one's joining probation. So, you know, they're moving on in their careers, and we will always have, you know, some form of turnover. But actually, I've just, before coming onto this video call this morning, I was just sifting for support workers. So actually, you know, we've got a couple of vacancies, but actually we're fully staffed. And what we're finding is as well, because people are working from home and not having people, you know, out for long periods of time travelling to see clients or travelling to meetings, and there's always lost time, isn't there? If we're in Northampton and then we've got to go to a meeting over in Corby, you know, there's lots of benefits actually from working from home that we have actually found. So, you know, resource-wise, we're in a really fortunate position, and Stephen has given us additional resource for the witness care unit because of COVID, there is significant backlogs in the courts at the moment, and we've been fortunate enough, we were very quick to put in a business case, and we've got 2 additional fixed-term contract witness care officers that are supporting the work in the witness care unit, which has been funded by Stephen. Stephen's got his hand up
I just
now.
wanted to make that. I don't know if everyone had kind of picked up in that. So in addition to that, it's victims and witnesses. So there are, and potentially there are at times more witnesses than there are victims in supporting them to go to court. And actually, Fiona's team manages that as well. So actually, we've got that kind of that wraparound care. Because the witness team used to be in Northampton Police. I think my predecessor kind of extracted it, but I don't think we'd quite put it in the set it up for success in the way that it has under Fiona. And you're right, we're particularly worried because there's a really significant jump in witnesses as a consequence of actually the Councillor Pritchard raised earlier on in our previous meeting around the kind of backlog that's going to be in court. And of course, for successful outcomes at court, only through the support of Fiona's team, both on the witness and victims, will you get a successful prosecution. Because that's one of the very, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about, a real concern for us, that actually with the delays in court, people kind of want to move on with their life. If you've been in a domestic violence relationship and actually you're going to be several years before you go in, the trauma that they kind of need to go through to actually kind of go back and relive that, it's very difficult to ask someone, well, we might want a thing, but actually they might want to move on with their life. And Fiona's been quite modest. There are facilities at Voice to allow video-enabled justice to make sure that someone can give evidence in court for some of those traumatic crimes in a safe environment, kind of a way. Fiona's is actually located not far from NGH, so there's a lot of thought and planning kind of went into the whole system to support in the best way possible.
Very much. Councillor Kane, Judy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Fiona, for a really informative, interesting presentation. It's really good to hear all the incredibly good work you're doing, and thanks to Stephen for the extra money for the victims. I just want to talk about domestic violence thing, Fiona. I'm retraining at the moment to be a counsellor, and I particularly want to work with young people, sort of the 11 to 18 range, which are the range of young people I know best from youth club work I do as a youth leader. I have unfortunately got a couple of young people who are in a domestic violence situation, and I just spend a lot of time listening to them, never mind the work we do at the youth club. The main thing is their mental health and well-being, and for me anyway, and especially with the whole COVID thing, young people are really, really suffering. Now, one of them is getting help from CAMS at the moment, and the other one has just turned 18 and has been dropped like a hot potato. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of sensible handover or communication between CAMS and adult mental health services. And I just wondered if there's how aware people are of that, and if there's any plans to address that situation, because it's going to cause quite a few problems, I think, because we have got young people who are transitioning, if you like, from one service to the other, and they're left in limbo. I just wonder what your thoughts on that were, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the mental health side of things is not my remit. I do know that there are issues within the county and service provision. Stephen, I don't know if you want to come in there with regards to...
You'll never ask me.
It is sort of connected, though, the mental health and the...
Absolutely. I mean, as you'll notice in the report, one of the things that quite rightly an awful lot of my time is spent on policing, but the actual responsibility is police and crime and all kind of the associated. So, for instance, on mental health, ironically, because of COVID, I don't think we've actually signed the contracts. It's one of my things to do this week around Op Alloy, which is where we pay the local commissioning group for mental health to actually have a nurse in a triage car that we can have out in policing. Someone might say, what's mental health to kind of do with it? Also a full-time nurse in the control room. So actually we can reduce the number of section 136s. So, and of course, mental health has really been exacerbated quite a lot during COVID with this kind of isolation, and he's nodding there for just to refer us to there. The number of missing people and risks for welfare, concern for welfare, has jumped significantly and is a significant volume driver across kind of policing at the moment. So some of the things that we've managed to put in place, I'm not saying is great. So Nikki put a business case together. So actually we fund CAMS, we give them a significant amount of money so they could extend the time in which they could actually give care, health and support to young people. I think we extended it. I'm looking at Nikki. It was something like from what they go until 5, and we labelled to 8 and put more. 4, and they go through to I think 9. Yeah, so the service stopped at 4 o'clock. Well, hang on. So a kid comes out of school and there's no support afterwards. Yeah. Now it goes on through 9. You'll notice from the report, I won't ruin my report, you know, our youth team has engaged since the beginning of the year with 2,500 children and young people. And I think your report says something like 2,200, but since in the report, there are 300 kids that have been engaged in. The ACE workers, they're deliberately there, and I think the numbers are in there as well, where they're engaging with families. The MADRA particularly supports where families are in terms of where families have DV occurring and children are present to provide both additional support and intervention. I still am concerned, and funny enough, myself, Nikki, and the Chief Constable met last night, and it was last night, wasn't it, Nick, to actually have a chat about what are we doing around also young couples just before they have children to see what we can support them. You know, you can see the domestic violence is a significant driver for Northamptonshire Police, and actually I think that the ongoing effects are seen across the whole of the county, whether that be in trauma at school, them going on with perpetrators kind of the future. So I actually think we kind of have a holistic offering. And Judy, what you've highlighted to me, perhaps what we'll do is I put the youth team down, I think, for the March briefing, subject to James and Jill agreeing. I think we've proposed that. And then actually, of course, it was some time ago since we talked about the ACE workers, so we'll bring that maybe in for the summer, or potentially the new commissioner can bring them back for that, depending on what happens in May type stuff. So,
right, thank you very much. I haven't got any more hands up, but I'm just looking at James's sort of instructions. He said basically, are there any extra information that we would like as a result of this item on the agenda? And any matters on it where we consider there further topics for further scrutiny. So I don't know whether that sort of triggers any things. I think, you know, it's been really interesting, and I think, you know, obviously the Commissioner keeps us up to date with the worker voice in his report anyway. But, you know, really, you know, you seem to be going from strength to strength, and you know, hope that still can, you know, keeps on continuing, and you know, gets the support of extra funding where it's necessary. So I don't see any hands. So thank you very much, Fiona, and you know, carry on the good work.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks very much for the invitation.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything that the panel as a whole panel wants to say? The default for for information received is to note it.
Yes, I mean, nobody sort of came forward with any burning things there. So I think, you know, if we could note it, you know, applaud the work that's going on, and you know, we will keep a watching brief on Stephen's got a point.
Yeah, I just you underestimate the power and prestige this panel has. I think as you've done in the past, would you, if you'd be so kind to offer your thanks and to support, to Fiona and the staff, I think it'd go down very well for them, particularly the great work they've been doing this time would be very much appreciated.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, we're very appreciative of the work, you know, very supportive and you know, think you're doing a great job. You know, if in the future we'll hopefully, or whoever's here then, because things are changing, you know, we'll, you know, come back at a future time to give us any updates as well. I think that'd be really.
We add that to the work programme, Chair, and maybe in 9 months' time, Fiona could.
Yes, I think, you know, that certainly, if Stephen will,
I think that would be good.
Bear that in mind, or James can make a note of that. Yeah. I think
I'd be happy to do so.
It's certainly it was an undervalued service, and I think it's getting its due attention now. But you know, it still needs to be you know, applauded where you've come so far.
Yes, wonderful work you're doing, Fiona, and to see the amount of calls you only receive for this quarter just prove the demand for your services.
Absolutely.
Well done, well done.
Yeah. How you cope with that many calls is quite amazing.
It's a challenge, but we enjoy a challenge. I shall leave you to the rest of the meeting if I may.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The next item is the fire and rescue plan delivery update.
Shall I get on with it, Madam Chairman?
Stephen, if you could, please.
Madam Chairman, so today's report sets out an update on the work being undertaken by the Fire and Rescue Service. As you see, a lot of positive work has been undertaken, which we have now seen example of the increase in appliance availability and the decrease in average response times. The Fire and Rescue Service is still undertaking work to support the county during the COVID-19 pandemic, and I was pleased that the service received a positive COVID inspection from HMIC FRS. That actually isn't in the public domain yet, but I think I've just made it. The official letter will come out shortly. I hope by me referencing it, they don't change their mind. But anyway, the draft I've seen is a good one. You'll see the service also taken a lot of work in relation to fire protection as we adapt to working during the pandemic to support and help protect people in a more targeted way. Finally, you'll be pleased to know we've managed to secure thousands of pounds in post-Grenfell funding to ensure every fire engine in the county is being equipped with a fire escape hood to help keep people safe during fire evacuations. We now have 120 fire escape hoods which can be placed over the heads of members of the public to help stop them from breathing in toxic gases, and will be used where appropriate to support rescues and evacuations. Nick, can you pass me mine, please? It's over there, my hood. I continue to be proud of the work of improvements that have been able to deliver, particularly commend the work that's being done by both the leadership team at the Fire and Rescue Service, but all this thing. I'm not going to model for you, but these are the hoods that I'm actually referencing. So actually, as you can see from them, it does look like something out of I can't remember what was that. There was a really good film with it was Renée Zellweger and someone else, some sort of Outbreak. That was it, something like it's out of that. Very skilled, but they actually genuinely, by being on fire appliances, could genuinely kind of save lives. So, you know, not only work is being done on protection, but good forbid if you're vicking, then the good news is it can actually help enough. Madam Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I am very good report. Just wondered when the new appliances that I know it takes quite a long while for them to come through. Stephen, when are you expecting them to arrive? Stephen?
Sorry, I'm just being told of an emergency, so forgive me a second. Those hoods are already on.
No, sorry, the appliances, the new appliances that are on order.
The appliances, I actually haven't got a specific timeline, but our expectation is over the next 12 months. They don't all arrive in one go. And I just, as I say, Mrs. King, are you there? Do you actually have, do you know a more defined, I know they're coming over the next sort of 12 months, but you might have a more specific one.
12 months.
You'll have to write them some checks.
12 to 18 months, the first 4.
Sorry, councillor.
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought it's 12 to 18 months for the first 4, and then we get another 4 sometime later. It's coming
Yes,
in batches,
I just
isn't it?
wondered if we've got an idea when the first ones will arrive.
My understanding is early in the next year, in the next financial year, but if the panel agree, I'll do an update to them after the meeting. I'll ask while we're in the meeting now and get you an update.
The other question I had was the decision records. You had IT infrastructure, and the contract just runs till the 31st of March 2021, if that's correctly written. I just wondered
on
why.
some of those, I think some of the bits that you see are catching up. So one of the things that's been a particular challenge for the Fire and Rescue Service is getting a handle on some of its contracts. We've actually had a number that we've needed to sign, if you like, when they were kind of rolling on. So there wasn't a kind of a robust assurance that we had a clear identification of all the different ones that we had got. As a consequence of some work both done by the new Enabling Services team and the Chief Fire Officer team, we have a greater handle on them. That doesn't mean that they're just going to end, but in the first instance, this is about us bringing them up to date. Some of you may or may not know, we have just appointed a Chief Technology Officer who works for Paul Bullen, who is to oversee technology in both police and fire. That's a capability that neither have had in the past, and that's deliberately designed to see how we can bring some of those things together. Like, for instance, at the moment, both police and fire are on separate instances of Office 365, and obviously our ambition is to bring them together because it better enables easy for them to share, collaborate, and protect the people of Northamptonshire.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Auger, Richard, you had your hand up first.
Chair, Commissioner, a couple of things. First of all, those hoods, fantastic idea, really, really good. Issue is, first of all, what's their shelf life, and have we got a programme to ensure that we maintain a supply of them going forward? You know what public services are like. They give a bit of funding for a bit of kit. It runs out and we never get any more. But if we are going to have them, is that going to be part of our permanent inventory for our fire service? First question.
Yes, they last for a number of years. If I'm going to zip across a second, the plastic is non-perishable, but you're right. There are in this part there are some the appropriate filters and stuff. So they last a number of years. They're actually in sealed containers to make sure, unlike this one, so they will last a number of years. One of the things Mrs. King has been very diligent on and is actually doing a great deal of work with the service is actually having a full understanding of all of the inventory of what I would call, we always knew how many fire engines we had, but maybe we didn't always understand how many hoses we had on every fire engine or where all the different kind of bits are. So Mrs. King's hair was even longer before she started pulling out, trying to track some of this stuff down from an inventory point of view so that we can have a robust, because I think there were bits that whilst we did a business case that we had a, forgive the firing one, something of a deluge of smaller things outside of fire engines that needed to kind of be updated. And of course, trying to update them all at the same time has been something of a challenge. So, Helen, we've kind of been doing an audit on that. I don't know what the time frame for that being complete is.
Helen, if you'd like to.
Thank you. I'll lower my hand. Yes, the audit is still underway. We'll find out that towards the end of the year. But in terms of replacing such items, you're absolutely right, Councillor Auger. There's been lots of cases in the past where grants were provided for one-off purchases of really good essential equipment, and plans were not put in place to have a sensible replacement. What we've been working with our fire colleagues to do on all of their equipment is to get a better understanding of all of their operational equipment and build in a sensible replacement programme for them. So we've still got a little bit more development to do on that, but we have an operational equipment reserve in place. The Chief Fire Officer also has an operational equipment contingency in his revenue budget as well. And when we do the budget work, we try and sensibly forecast over the years the sensible replacement of the equipment also. So we are trying to take through a sensible equipment replacement programme, because fire have lots of stuff to replace, we are finding.
And Councillor Ogger, forgive my indulgence. I am hoping to be around for the replacement of the, but I believe the replacement is something like 5 to 7 years. So I hope to answer that question in the appropriate time as well.
Looks like I'll never get in there by that rate, and you'll do well with it. Second question is, with regard, I'm sure that you felt the same when some of the testimony in the Manchester bombing inquiry with regard to the lack of coordination between services. I know you've got an entry in your report with regard to that. Can you confirm, I suppose, for public's reassurance, that there are tabletops being planned whereby we can test and challenge these? It's all right having an overview and looking and reviewing it, but there's nothing like running some sort of exercise to ensure that, God forbid it ever happens on our patch, but when it does, all the blue light services are singing from the same sheet. That's the second question.
2 parts to that. So regular, I can assure you, regular tabletops are being run for the marauding, the MT8 marauding terrorists. Some of you will be aware in the North of County we had something that really started to look like that. An offender with knives in a supermarket. I don't think it's quite come to court yet, but that was a significant incident that occurred there. You can also be assured that our Chief Constable holds the position on kind of joint things. So I know he was at the Fire College recently looking at how police and fire work together. As a county, we've actually done really well on our NILOs and the actual owning and the Jessup principles to make sure that we kind of work together. And obviously we also have the kind of joint command unit. All of that puts us in a good position. There are good protocols between our control room, but also it's worth saying that belies my ambition to see both sets of control room hosted in the same place on a similar system. Now, in a perfect world, I'd love it to be the same system, but also money needs to come into play and timing and procurement and all those sort of things. But that continues to remain my ambition. But that has been operationalised and there's some good work been done in that area.
I think your point about the same system is really, really important. Working on 2 different systems on the same incident can actually cost lives. So I would support you certainly politically to try to achieve that.
Yeah, and just on that, in Manchester, the police, we've looked at that and you'll notice in some of the, I don't know if it's in the documents you've got in front of you, but at the recent things I've asked the force and the fire service around their kind of interoperability continues to be a challenge that I'm asking, pushing both chiefs hard on. But, it's a good example. In Manchester, the fire control room is actually connected to, I think it's in Lancashire, because it's all done on one big area. And of course, the control room for policing was in central Manchester. And actually, they just didn't talk to one another well enough. So actually, we've got to test those protocols. And quite frankly, for me, it'll be a manifesto commitment that says I want to see both control rooms, and we do have a plan to deliver on that. We just got to try and make the money work, put them in the same location on the same system. Of course, that's still got to be done at the same time as we're moving off of the airwave system to the emergency services network, which both is an opportunity and a risk kind of all at the same time.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for your tolerance with me. One last one. I didn't see it in your report. With regard to income generation, just wondering your thoughts on the fire service and ways to help put some pressure off income streams on have they got many income generation schemes I know that they've, with regards to some of the training that they specialise in, I'm just wondering if that can be developed and featured. Is it part of your plan?
What a bloody great idea, Richard. It's almost like you're throwing me the questions I want you to ask me. I can't announce the person who's been successful. We have been recruiting recently for a head of commercial for both police and fire to see what we could look at. It's going to be a 2-year project to look at income generation across both police and fire. We know there are some opportunities, for instance, at the Chelveston site because of what's been built up and invested in over there, which will allow potentially other fire services to come and train. It will generate some money that will potentially facilitate reduced burden on us rather than in terms of profit, but we're bringing them in to see, well, actually, is there an opportunity maybe in some commercial endeavors to generate profit? So that's a 2-year project. I know the person that's been offered the job, and I think they'll do. I actually think they'll really make a success of that, and I'm confident it's a 2-year pilot that will again generate some income to complement operation efficiency. I want to make sure it's done in a responsible way and is no detriment to. What you don't want is you've got some commercial activities and you're not training your firefighters, so it's got to be done properly.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I'm quite happy to see that the pump availability has improved considerably. I'm also very pleased with the proposals for the new fire engines and also safety equipment for firefighters. My concern is the mental effect that is likely to take place by with individuals, and I would like to know how that is monitored and what actions have we got in place to take care of firefighters who are deemed to be suffering from maybe mental fatigue, whatever the case may be. And finally, when talking in terms of investment, yes, we have the site in East Northampton for training. What about that Cobra equipment that we used to promote a lot? Mm-hmm. I thought that the fire services was going to train people to use that equipment and also get a proportion of the sale, of the cost of sale for that equipment if other forces should decide to buy that equipment. Commissioner?
Thank you. Going backwards through your question, if I may, and if I forget the first one at the end, please feel free to remind me.
Yes.
I'm not as mental dexterity as I used to have, you know. I think the first thing I would kind of say, just on Cobra, yes, it has been a source of income for the service over a period of time, and continue. We have a number of service credits that are kind of we will use to kind of acquire equipment. I think that has rolled out more and more across services, and actually, so it's potentially a diminishing one. I don't want to compromise. There is potentially something in the offing that we're working on that may mean, like I say, some others in terms of come and training. There is also the opportunity for the site over in East Northampton that maybe even could provide some public order training from a policing, so we genuinely kind of use that. That goes to Councillor August's point. That would allow kind of training alongside one another and actually that kind of comfort and trust. And I think in fairness, we have already made significant strides here in Northamptonshire, long before me, if you like, through the way it work in the county. you know, I talked to some of my other PFCC colleagues, and some of the challenges that are having beg a belief, and in those counties they probably need to be reminded that they're actually serving the public, not themselves. To your one around kind of welfare, welfare on both levels is very important to us, and I know it is to Darren, who is also kind of the head of paid service there. So actually, you know, there are good welfare options, and I even remember signing a contract just a couple of days ago to extend some of the stuff that they're doing. But I think I would be wrong to kind of say the financial envelope, which I won't ruin our presentation kind of later, is still a tight one for the fire service. And I'll probably address that there, and I'll give greater insight to some of the work we've been trying to do with the Home Office to try and do it, because I am very aware that in many respects they're in buildings that aren't as nice as we would want them to be, as safe as we would want them to be, which is also why the bringing together police and fire estate enables both of those things to be kind of delivered on. But we remain committed to taking care of firefighters and police officers' welfare in a time which also, you're dead right, it's the whole pandemic with people working from home and the kind of extra stress that people are under has been something we're very, very concerned about and very cognizant of, because actually it's affecting the public as a whole, but particularly those that continue to serve all the time are kind of under extra pressure, whether it be kind of overtime, those bits. And, you know, some of the bits you'll notice in there with the kind of second lockdown, there's further driving of kind of ambulances. We were able to generate some extra income because also fire and safety checks that the fire service has been doing in conjunction with kind of safer streets. So I can't be more proud of the people that I have the privilege of working for and the great work that they're actually doing. And at the end of the day, people are our most important assets, and quite frankly, we have to take good care of them.
Mrs. Shields.
Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Anita. Missed you this morning.
I have two little questions for you. One is
they're never little. I always have to be on my guard. Are you ready?
One of the questions is to do with NFRS performance update. Fatality in primary fire per 100,000, RTC in rural area. Now, one of the things that is being reported by yourself is that the response time on a second pump attendance being slow. In this particular point, to facilitate the panel's scrutiny, do you at present have in place some kind of benchmark measure for measuring the volume of incident versus response time, the numbers of calls received with location, plotted fire, RTC and special service to identify any cluster or hotspot? So that is question number one. And the last one is about something you said earlier on about staffing. You have made an assurance statement, paragraph reference 3.5, in relation to home working. Do you have some kind of productivity measurement compared to sick rates for the staff, and what is being done to support them during COVID-19?
Like I said at the beginning, nice, easy questions there, Anita. Thank you very much. Just kind of going, you asked me around kind of clusters and that kind of stuff. If I can, I will just, because this week we had the accountability board after we've issued it, a lot of the questions, ironically, are in my report for this week. And I'm just quickly looking through my folder, because then I was going to flash before you, if I could, one that kind of shows in terms of kind of cluster availability and some of the the kind of service performance, because of course you're dead right, and I'll just use road traffic as a kind of a question, because actually if I look at a kind of this is a temporal heat map, which you probably won't mean very much to you there, but I'll give you
I can see
the kind of the highlights, which kind of it talks about where you've got RTCs, dwelling fires and mobilisation. So of course our actual fire stations are well located to cover major risk from fire across the county. Now that probably doesn't put them in the perfect location for road traffic accidents, because they're not in there. One of my challenges, Darren, should we do stuff differently, but also to make sure we've learned from things we've done in the past. So a lot of work has been done when we looked at the fire stations to make sure they were in the right rate in terms of coverage, and obviously we've got we measure at the same time, and you'll notice there's some commonality between the response time for police and fire. So a lot of work is done to make sure they're kind of in the right location. The other one is you do get differences in terms of the most important is the first engine. Now the other one tends to be some, if you like, a backup. So we have strategically located and been working quite hard on to make sure that our whole time coverage across county is best it can be. And then of course there is slightly less pressure in then you can bring on, if you like, your retained. Now, one of my challenges to the service at this time is, of course, that was potentially easier during lockdown, because as a consequence of kind of people being furloughed or at home, then potentially they've been more available. So one of my challenges is to make sure that that continues. Now, I can assure you, whilst it has dropped back a little bit, the service is actually maintaining it. So I'm comfortable in terms of where they are in respect of kind of coverage and the secondary time. I'm very, and I wouldn't want anything I've ever said to, I'm very, very pleased with this, and it's worth bearing in mind that this has been done just by hard work, because yes, we might have added 20 new firefighters this year, but you know, a lot of the gains that you kind of see, they started training, I think they'd been here 4 weeks when the first lockdown occurred, because we actually had to bring them back to the training college, and they actually only went on to station in something like July. So this is everybody leaning in, working hard and pulling together. I think also it did help that they have the confidence now that any council tax that's raised in their name, the money goes to them. And so as a consequence, allows them kind of to plan better for the future. I keep trying to stay away from money, otherwise Mrs. King will shoot me and I shall ruin some of our good stuff a little later. So I'm assured that their response time is good and that is maintainable as the pumps kind of get delivered. Since you put it earlier, I think actually we anticipate delivery to Council Strachan in April, May of next year, but the bit about it will take them a couple of months before they're shaken down. So it'll probably be the back end of the year or the start of the following year before they're actually on the run. Because obviously the last thing any of us wants is to put something on it, kind of break down. And also in the middle of that, there's the new high rise that I think we're still currently speccing out at this moment in time. Thankfully, we don't have many of them, but God forbid we want to make sure we've got them. I'm sure there was another question, Anita, that I had forgotten as I rambled on. I mean, answered your first question.
Was there another question, Anita? Your first question, possibly?
Yeah, my other question was your assurance statement on the staff in relation to homeworking.
Yes.
Obviously, yeah, online.
I think it's fair to say that the fire service, if you like, was not in as good a state of preparedness as the police service when it came to kind of a mobility. So actually, there's been some challenges in our kind of IT area, hence the comment about bringing up to date some contracts that, quite frankly, with continued pay, because part of that was, without boring you with the intimate details, when in the past, given how the county council funded them, when they kind of got a grant, they kind of paid it for several years. So, you know, from an accounting practice point of view, you would then potentially get some prizes a number of years down the line and go, well, we've got this service, do we need to renew it? It's been paid for and running. but potentially we didn't see it coming. And I use the royal we in that sense. So they weren't quite as prepared. But like I said, ironically, as testimony, my one-to-one with Darren was done over Teams yesterday, and we were sharing screens and presentation, which might sound all very boring when you look at things, but the ability to do that in a secure and efficient way is testimony to kind of the rollout. Additional laptops and stuff like that have been bought to enable it, but that isn't the whole answer. We continue to remain the same way I said for firefighters, of all of our teams to make sure they kind of work together. And some of you will know, of course, we've announced the Derby Close purchase, which will enable them to kind of come together in a safe way, hopefully opening in March of next year, subject to the kind of COVID things not slowing it down, but trying to create a working environment. So I also think having that kind of channeling, because that tends to be a lot of your home workers and your enabling services, which it's designed to be. So I feel confident that they, and of course a lot of consultation and showing of plans, which I'm not sure we've shared with you, because no offense, we've got to keep them happy more than we have you at this moment, but we'll bring some plans that shows you some of that.
Okay, Paul Fell, did you have your hand up, or are you taking it down again now, are you?
Yeah, well, I was just going to add 30 seconds to that, if I may, Stephen, just to add a bit. So Anita asked about analysis. Just to reassure you, they do analysis on all the things that you referred to. I won't go through the list again. And those analysis results are dropped onto by organisations such as their prevention section and the arson task force, which is a combination of resources between police and fire. So that answers that. And in terms of, you touched on the productivity of people working from home, just be clear, obviously firefighters weren't working from home, it was support staff, but just to reassure you on that, HMIC FRS have just done an inspection in relation to how the service responded to COVID-19, and their findings are they managed to deliver all their statutory requirements and responded well. So I don't think there's any concerns there that people became less productive because they're working from home. In fact, sickness levels went down both in the police and the fire service during the first lockdowns, perversely enough.
And I just on that, and I think that's a challenge for both services. Well, I actually don't think it will be for county and others to actually make sure that our kind of estates, our mobility strategy allows that healthy blend of kind of home working where appropriate, but also at the same time the camaraderie and kind of the team element that we're doing. So work is being done in both areas, and actually by sharing the best of both worlds for both police and fire, we'll hopefully come up with better areas and better solutions in that area.
Winston, I've got your hand up, but we need to move on fairly quickly.
Yes,
so
very quickly,
yep.
Chair, very quickly. One, will the IT equipment be compatible with the police? And two, how does our response time compare to other services? Very quickly. No.
On the response time, it wasn't favourable, but it is now. I think there's some work one thing that is being done in terms of absolute is there hasn't been, but there is now. There actually is kind of a fire standards board on a national basis, because unlike kind of home office things, each organisation records its stuff slightly differently. So actually, we from the time you pick up the phone when we measure our response time, whereas some people might go, well, actually, we're not measuring it until the point of dispatch. Now, on a fire, I would actually argue that's the right way. So it's at the point someone rings us to when it arrives. For instance, from a policing point of view, if someone's got to do some identification and someone's got to check in terms of their vulnerability, we might look at them in slightly different ways. So ironically, there's some work being done on both of those.
Does that answer both questions? Okay, so James, do we just we've had various points brought up. I think we just note the report. There was anything that we needed further scrutiny. I've just kept up to date with the general information that was coming out.
Reference was made during the earlier discussion to the panel possibly being provided with some further information about the availability of the new pumps when they would come into use, but I don't know whether that was then answered during subsequent discussion.
Yeah, I think we got an answer to that. Yeah, in the end. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So without further ado, could we go on to the police and crime delivery update, please?
Of course. Madam Chairman, today's report provides you both an update on the work we've delivered since the last communication to the panel, and a more comprehensive police and crime plan performance framework for the second quarter at Appendix 1, which I will keep under review in light of any comments you may have. So obviously we want to try and provide you with as much information as appropriately possible. I'm also proud of a lot of positive work which has been delivered from my office. For example, I'm pleased that as it approaches its first year, our youth service is now at full capacity, and we're helping to support vulnerable young children across Northamptonshire. During the last 11 months, it was 2,200, like I said, at the date of the report, now at 2,500 through the detached work based on our youth work, targeted interventions designed to address the underlying cause of offending and steer children and young people away from criminality in our communities. Improve road safety is one of my key priorities, and the rollout of the AMPR net cameras across the county, which has been supported by an additional £1.3 million investment from my office, will see a more than doubling of the fixed camera site network across Northamptonshire. The new cameras will be placed in strategic locations on the major road networks in the county to cover both rural areas and also to provide additional support in particularly Corby and Daventry, which actually haven't been well served, and should also deter those who choose to drive commit criminal acts on our roads. Finally, the position on residential burglary remains positive. In relation to the incidence of burglary, there's been a reduction of over 30% in the past 12 months on a rolling period, and the prediction currently is for a further 8% in this financial year. The current performance relating to burglary and the wider acquisitive crime agenda is being supplemented by the work led by my office relating to the Home Office Safer Streets project. These examples reflect the wide breadth of the work we undertake to deliver a safer Northamptonshire. You'll see that the work I undertake to hold the Chief Constable to account for the performance of the force through the accountability and commissioning process. Today's report is rather long, so I shall shut up and let you ask me some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. First of all, I'd like to just applaud the work that's going on, happens to be in my division, but with the safer streets and the alley-gating and CCTV. I was concerned with the tight timescale that the money had to be spent by, but they seem to be getting on very well with getting that in place, and therefore utilising the money before the deadline. So
I'm being cheeky, Jill. Yeah. It is extremely tight, and Paul, the two Pauls, Paul Golly and Paul Fell, they've been so successful at it. I don't know if we probably still haven't heard yet, Paul Fell, have we? But actually, because some commissioners were not being good at getting it delivered, money was being handed back to the Home Office, and Paul, in his conversation with the Home Office, they were offering him more money, but they were going to let us know by last Friday on our revised proposal, and they were like, "Oh no, we can't let you know. Well, we might let you know by this Friday." We're like, "Look, we're good at getting your money spent, but there is in COVID, it's not easy to procure some of this stuff." I don't know if you've heard yet, have you, Paul?
No, I haven't, but I have written to the Home Office this morning, coincidentally, to say if we don't hear by Friday, we may have to withdraw our kind offer of having more money, only on the basis that some of the products that we're buying have got an 8 to 9 week lead-in time. So if we can't get the money and get them ordered, we simply won't be able to get them into the country and fitted before that time. I remain hopeful. We'll find out tomorrow, though.
You will have to. They will have to spend it before the 31st of March. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That's correct.
That's the challenge.
That's correct, and we can do that, Anita. We've got a very, very good plan that I'm confident we can deliver, but I can only deliver it if the Home Office make their mind up about whether we can have the money. They did. It was their timescales. They promised to let me know last Friday. Then they said it would be Monday or Tuesday. I'm on their back every day.
Excellent.
And I think on that, Councillor Strachan will be particularly impressed about some of the target hardening and some of the work that's being done with. We could spend an hour on this alone, couldn't we, Paul? It's being done around kind of Burnham Terrace, Stockley Park, and those kind of things to really make our communities kind of genuinely safer. And referencing there in terms of the kits that people are getting.
Yes.
Yeah, we could do, and happy to bring after Christmas. When we've started, when we've actually got some real results, happy to bring something back as an update.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Councillor Auger, Richard, you had your hand up first.
Thank you. Commissioner, just want to get some clarity on the Neighbourhood Watch investment of 9.5k. I just quote from the paragraph here. It says, the Northamptonshire Neighbourhood Watch Association was awarded 9,500 for Operation Target, which aims to reduce crime and build stronger and safer communities in crime hotspots areas by establishing neighbourhood watch schemes. Now, I certainly know, probably was in the mid-2000s, some research came out and basically said that the link between neighbourhood watch investment and reduction of crime is difficult to prove, and at best it's modest and often it's non-existent. Although I did have a responsibility to put them in place, but I put them in place purely to try to galvanise community spirit within neighbourhoods, because the actual outcomes weren't certain. Now it probably depends a lot on how active that scheme is going to be run. My concern is one, has there been any recent survey that says this is a good spend of 9.5 grand? And your thoughts on whether that money could have been spent better to get outcomes in other areas of crime reduction. So I'm not up to date with the modern with any recent survey, so I may be out of date on this. But just your thoughts on that, Commissioner, would be helpful.
Well, firstly, I encourage anyone to come forward and apply for our Safer Community grant. I'll take the opportunity to visit my site, because actually during COVID, the people applying has kind of gone down. So we've changed our process to do it. To be fair, I continue to be pleased with the work that Neighbourhood Watch is doing here in the county of Northamptonshire. I can't comment on it on a kind of wider national basis, but actually, as someone who does a lot of public talks, not so much during COVID, then the likes of Alan Earl, who's the chair of it here in the county, I can't get away from the fella in terms of their thing. You are right. I would probably just remind you it's a very modest sum to cover the whole of the county, 800,000 people, and it was deliberately designed to create in areas where they didn't have it. So one of the ones I think we referenced in it, I've got it in front of me, was I think the first one was in Pineham Lock, where they'd had some particular challenges that some of you might be aware of with the complicated traveller site in terms of that area. So actually, you're right. If you just throw it in kind of just in the path, give it to any outside body with kind of out scrutiny, you run the risk of kind of not getting your outcomes. As someone who visited and actually met the community of the launch of that one, actually, if it did nothing else, actually bringing a community together to enable them to kind of communicate with one another, and actually it then led to a public meeting. It's kind of not the money itself, it's an important part of it, but actually I think the bit that's quite good here in Northamptonshire is the genuine work that's going on between Northamptonshire Police and Neighbourhood Watch, and also the project this works in conjunction with our neighbourhood alert system. Paul will probably interrupt me, which has got upwards of nearly 20,000 people on it, where they offers both advice, alerts, and some of those things. So it's actually part of the mix. I'd also remind a proportion of the money that we give out in the grant is taken off of criminals and or is augmented where we've got a little bit more aggressive. And I'll let Mrs. King remind me of the location in our bit later. There is a site where you can go and you can contribute yourself, because you can buy some good stuff on eBay at great value that has come from interesting places. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, and Mrs. Shields, you're next.
Yes, Stephen.
Anita.
Stephen, we've already we've already cleared the situation of fight crime and protect people about that 234%. So that is being identified. I have a question about the accountability board that was held on the 10th of November. And this is to do with assurance statements.
Before I let you skip over that one, I did just to make sure that you knew what that was. That was going for 103 crimes to 342. I mean, all of those are is still a reasonable volume. But actually, just to make sure that we're not talking thousands, I think actually, as the inspection report that I don't yet have on my desk will testify, some of this is as a consequence of the work between Northamptonshire Police, the County Council, the wider system of identifying some of this stuff that's actually already there. So I know it might sound very odd to say that, but sometimes an increase in crime statistics is actually you peeling it back and kind of understanding it. Sorry, Anita.
Can I just clarify, that was the page 61, the 234%
that you asked.
Yes, we'd queried that earlier on and got a bit of clarification on that, and it was it wasn't quite as stark as it looked. It was to do with how, I mean, basically there were no reports in the previous few months because the schools were closed, and therefore it seemed like a big surge, but actually it was just a comparison of 2 months that was
absolutely. But also it is the system of people of Northamptonshire are actually doing a better job as well.
I don't know.
Sorry, Anita. Back to your insurance question.
I don't know if you've answered my question. My question was about the statement you made about the concern of the force being an outlier, in particular knife crime and rassle. My question to you is, how confident are you that the additional assurance you are seeking will be provided this financial year? And does the force understand why this is the case, and that an operational plan will be forthcoming by the Chief of Police to reduce those statistics, given you have offered additional funding or resource if the force did require it?
Okay, it is a shame that we weren't able to join us this morning, because we went through exactly these points. I am genuinely confident that progress has been made. We continue to remain an outlier, and considerable pressure continues to be applied to the force to make sure it understands its role in what it can do. So some of the stuff that was kind of talked about that I won't regurgitate, given it was a confidential briefing, but some of it relates to some of the secondary recording, some stuff around kind of primary and domestic. Do I think Northamptonshire Police has always had as comprehensive understanding of its demand that it does today? No. Do I think, and it sounds kind of, I don't mean it to be glib, Northamptonshire Police is on a journey and has made genuinely real progress, but that is, if you like, in fits and spurts. We talk about the extra 200 police officers that are now in the service, and that isn't those. That means that's probably more like 450 new since I've started. Now, some of those are also quite young. And I don't mean I wish I was still young, but actually that doesn't mean they've kind of got the depth experience that someone like Paul Fell and Richard, who have been around forever. Sorry, boys. In terms of wise old hands, I think is the word I'm probably looking for. That kind of comes with time. So actually, there is a bit about doing it. I think some of the investments we've made, both in people, technology, to make sure that we also understand why some of these things are occurring. So actually, for instance, on knife crime, we actually record it slightly different here in the county to the Home Office kind of rules. Now, that's not to kind of say we're trying to play with numbers, but actually, if there's a domestic incident where a knife was present, then we record both a domestic incident and also we would incur a knife crime. So in some respects, we have to be careful that you've got
duplication,
double counting. And I would remind everybody that Northamptonshire Police is only one of 5 forces in the country to get a good on its crime recording. Some of you may have seen that, and it gives me no joy to say it, Greater Manchester Police, a proud force, has actually said that it's not recording 1 in 4 crimes. How can you actually know what your demand looks like and actually target appropriately if you do not have those kind of basic building blocks in place? So actually, then what happens is you can pretend your numbers are going down. I'm confident that some of our stuff will continue to go up as we identify it. And some of that bits, am I comfortable that the force fully understands in every area of the thing it's got an answer? No, but I am confident, probably for the first time, that they at least know, and there are some plans in place to get it where they haven't, and there are plans in place where they know that whether they have got it and they're executing on those. So I'm very comfortable with the direction. I'm confident in the leadership of the Chief Constable and his team. But I'm also cognizant that they're not where we would like them to be, not where I would like them to be. Our ambition is for Northamptonshire Police to become an outstanding force. I would kind of liken it this way. Northamptonshire Police was probably not many years ago, was in the relegation zone and kind of hanging on. I tried to say, someone said to me a good analogy, they're a bit Stoke City at the minute. They ain't going to get relegated, but they ain't going to win any silverware. Well, actually, I kind of want to make sure, if I was carrying on with my football analogy, if Manchester United was coming to town, they'd fear coming to Northampton. I'm not sure that they did. And I suppose in some respects, one of the analogies that the chief gave earlier, Leicestershire Police has complained that they're arresting more criminals from Northamptonshire of late, purely as a consequence, is that they feel they're too likely to get caught here, so they're going over the border. Now, I don't know if that means they're all going over the harbour and there's some good affluence and they're targeting that area, or actually genuinely they're starting to feel the kind of changes that are sort of coming along. And I suppose in some respects that does mean then crime needs to go up, because if you're going to, 100 doors in 100 days, then actually if you're going to go and arrest criminals, you're going to find knives, you're going to find drugs, then actually it has to go up before it kind of comes down. So I reiterate it. I feel they're moving up the table, the grid, depending on what your sport is, but they're not at the front yet, but they're definitely going in the right direction now. And they start, and probably for one of, I actually genuinely feel confident that they have a better understanding of some of the things that they need to do to move them up there, rather than I think a bit too much hope in the past. Long answer to your question, but I thought it was worthy of that background.
We have a couple of people who need to leave at 4, so we'll need to crack on. Ian, just quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You might be right, Stephen, about the criminals going across the Market Harbour and Leicester. Where I live in Rothwell, there's been a lot more traffic on the road heading that way lately.
Well, the good news is with the AMPR cameras, we'll be able to monitor them going and coming back.
Yeah, I've got 3 coming in the town. Good stuff.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for the report. There's a lot of good positive stuff in there. It's just a quick question about the 8 immediate response or rapid response vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
It's too early to say what impact they've had on road safety or road crime.
I would say is the anecdotal bit that I can kind of give you, and I don't know whether it's because of ironically, it's funny, isn't it? Whether it's because they're blue and people notice them, whereas I think some people don't notice the kind of white police cars. So we know that there's kind of more recognition coming from it. that there have been, I've got anecdotal incidents of them kind of making an impact, but it is a bit too soon. But we will look at it, because not all of them are out there all the time yet.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Just before we leave this item, we've been concerned about the courts and the overload, and now we're getting a Nightingale court. I wonder if perhaps you could just keep us up to date in future of how the backlog is being processed as a result of that.
And that's one I'll actually have to look at with the local criminal justice board tomorrow. One of our challenges, the backlog, genuinely is a concern across the country, but I'm pleased with some of the work that's kind of going here in Northamptonshire and the partnership approach that's kind of going as a consequence of it. It genuinely is a kind of real risk. I kind of have to be careful. So confidential, I get some numbers, but actually the HMCTS and there's a data sharing agreement. I have to be careful kind of about what I will share. But I've probably got some stats that I can get you around kind of from voice around victims. So I'll take that one away and see what I can do to give you some benchmarks, to give you some insight. Thank
you very much. James, I think we've pursued various things. I mean, nothing sort of come up as a, particular point. Anitra, did you want to come back?
No, and just to say, if on picking up on the last point, it sounds as if that's an item for the future of the work programme, a potential update on the situation with the court's backlog.
Yeah, okay. Otherwise, we're happy to note the report.
Okay.
Okay. Right, we'll now go on to finance, fire and rescue budget first.
Okay. Madam Chairman, this report sets out at a high level the forecast financial outturn for the period the 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021, together with a financial update. So at the end of October 2020, there is a forecast underspend of 87k on the NCFRA budget. This compares to a forecast of 59k underspend in July. It is also anticipated that the underspend will increase further before the year end, and if so, this will be ring-fenced and used to support the 2022 budget. I think that's kind of an important point. So I think one of the key messages from me to the fire service, if you don't spend it, you will not lose it. You will get it back and it will help for the future, something that hasn't always been the case. This report also provides you with an update on the financial uncertainties during the year, and hence why it's important that every penny that we don't spend, we keep and put back in for future years, and the impact of COVID-19 on funding and the medium-term financial plan. Although the financial settlement is not yet being received, early indications are that the 2021-22 funding position will be challenging. I've raised this with the MCHLG and the Home Office, and the Chief Finance Officer has all been working closely with these departments and the Chief Fire Officer for some time to identify, review and propose options which will mitigate the potential impacts. So between now and February, work will continue on the budget, and this, together with the views of the public and the settlement, will help inform my preset proposal to the panel in April of next year. A budget briefing session is also planned in early 2020, which will provide attendees more detail on the budget and the proposed precepts. So as part of the budget processing setting, I would like to host a session on the budget for a small member of the panel, along with the lines of the Essex model as set out in the report. This will help us both to start and develop a new way of working as we look how best to formalise this approach for future years. A dedicated small working group will have the opportunity to learn more about our budget setting process and the challenges and pressures that are inevitably part of this work. I think we've set aside the 14th of January, and we'll work closely with James to finalise. We're joined by Helen King, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you sort of preempted something that's later on the agenda with the small working group that we had, looking at potential ways of working for the future, and that was something that we were hoping that we could arrange with you. We seem to have somebody just coming in.
Look at that. We've said yes before you even asked.
So you either read our mind or you saw the notes. So, but we're very welcome that we can certainly, deal with that at the moment. And I think it will give us a chance to go into a bit of depth, a small working group that then can report back to the larger panel. So thank you very much for that. Do we have any other questions? I mean, it's it's very heartening to see that you've got an underspend, but just in terms of the whole time and retained firefighters, some of the underspend is on salaries. Does that represent any risk to service delivery that you've got an underspend in that area?
I'm going to answer, and I'm going to let Mrs. King supplement my answer with far wiser words that are going to come from my mouth. I think the first thing, look, as a consequence of the COVID situation, there was greater availability from retained, which helped to mitigate some of the. So actually, we were able to provide an enhanced service, but at the same time without things. So actually, one of the things we put in the budget was the recruitment of 12 full-time to enable them to, if you like, enhance our bank so they could be strategically moved around. Because some of the, without getting into the detail, one of the reasons that sometimes stops a fire engine being on the run is you've got a whole crew, but you've got no driver. So actually, if we can move a driver down to Brackley fire station, that pump can be on the run in a way that it might not be because the person who is the designated driver is not available. So actually some of those strategic things are kind of being put in place. And I think it's those kind of smart, innovative things that are kind of, you see are actually kind of making the difference. So no, this is also as a consequence of genuinely people looking hard at their budgets and kind of saying, and because ironically you're seeing the overall manifestation of a slight underspend, but as Mrs. King will tell you, we've turned over many a rock to find other inflationary costs that we didn't expect to be there. But the good thing is, by having if you like, and obviously I would say this, by having under our governance, they know that the money is raised in their name, they get to spend it, and it will get spent back with them. So also there's no, it kind of helps with that desire that rather than kind of go, well, I've got to spend it before the financial year end, they know that actually they'll get it back in future years. It protects them.
I think
Helen, have you left us, or you flashed up and then disappeared? Are you?
We didn't mention earlier on the other report, but obviously the fire service is likely to be called in to help with vaccination, and that obviously could be a small or an enormous job. So I hope that that's not going to affect their performance. And
no, and just on that, and Paul, one of the things I asked was actually early on before Scuds was actually to the LRF what was going to be required, or did we have any indication of should we put up extra investment to enable support for that, to make sure at the end of the day, when you have a mantra across thing at making Northamptonshire safer, that's not just our blue light services, that's about what can we all generally do to help. So I'd asked the question, can we do, and I was given assurance that the LRF here in Northamptonshire has done some really good work and has some kind of good plans in place. But obviously we remain as ready as we can in any way, shape, or across police and fire for them to play their part to get as many vaccinations and keep our communities as safe as possible.
Thank you very much.
Have got anything you want to add to that, Paul?
No, well, only other than the LRF have got plans to do that with both police and fire if it's required, bearing in mind the military are going to be used to support. I know some fire services have already volunteered their staff to help administer the vaccine, and the FBU have advised their firefighters to not get involved in it, but that's an ongoing discussion nationally.
Yeah, Winston will ask for your help on that one, eh?
Oh, by the way, Stephen, I think you will be with us after May the 6th. I know. They've been.
Is that just, Vincent? Is that a lie that I ain't got COVID or re-elected? I'm not quite sure sometimes.
Well,
at the minute.
We don't seem to have any hands up. So, James, do we need to just noting the report, and obviously we'll look with interest when it comes to the budget and go into a lot more detail at that stage. But,
Mrs. King is trying to join us, so I think when she comes back, we should
she...
tell her we've agreed an enhanced budget, and she might drop back off again if we're not careful.
Yes. Yes, somebody came back in, and I realised now it was Helen, because it was named King, and it didn't quite ring bell.
Would you like me to move on to police, madam?
Yes, well, we'll go on to the police, and if Helen then pops back up, she can talk to both of them. Okay.
So, Madam Chairman, the police finance report sets out a high level the forecast financial outturn for the period the 1st of April 2020 to March 31st, 2022, together with a financial update. So at this stage in the year, there is a net forecast underspend of £1.2 million, and subject to the final outturn for the year, it's my intention to make an additional, I have trouble saying that, additional revenue contribution to capital, which will help to reduce capital financing costs on the revenue budget in future years. Furthermore, it is my intention to set aside any further underspends to help support the 21-22 budget if required. The report sets out the key variances for the budget managed by the force and the updates on the capital programme, as well as the COVID-19 grant and revenue cost. The report also sets out the variances on the OPFCC budget and also highlights that changes have been made within my office to reduce current and future year-on-year costs even further. Although the settlement for the 21-22 has not yet been received, early indications are that the funding position for 21-22 will be challenging, and the report summarises some of the information contained within the spending review in respect to policing. Between now and February, work will continue on the budget, and this, together with the views of the public and the settlement, which we're hoping will be next week, will help to inform my precept proposal to the panel in February. A budget briefing session I mentioned earlier in 2021 will be organised, I think, as I said earlier, targeting the 14th of January with it, so we can actually get more detail to you and propose precept and put it. As ever, I and Helen King, who I hope is joining us again now, will take any questions.
I think
Helen, we were going to tease you and say, while you weren't here, I agreed to some additional expenditure. See, she agreed. Silence is almost as good as agreement, I think. She liked it so much, she agreed. She left. I'm happy to take the questions anyway.
Sorry, I got a message on the chat there from Councillor Kane, who's had to leave unexpectedly, so she gives her apologies. Yes, sorry, Helen, are you back with us? Oh, yes, everything moved, and you've moved. It's very disconcerting. I think we seem to have lost Helen again.
Yeah, she's no longer on.
Ah, okay.
I'm afraid you'll have to just deal with me, I'm afraid.
All
it's
right.
a test of whether I actually know what I'm talking about in the numbers.
Yes, so I'm just going to. So I did have a hand.
Shields,
Mrs. Shields.
You're on mute, Mrs. Shields.
Yeah. Sorry, Stephen. In the absence of Helen, I will ask a question to you, obviously, Stephen. I just dive into COVID-19 grant and forecast. It states there that the revenue costs are 700K, which we know from the capital being transferred to the revenue cost, which includes some for lost income. The Home Office have agreed to fund 214k of PPE costs so far and have indicated that more grant funding for PPE may be available. So would additional grant be available before the 31st of March? And if it's not, what will be the impact of it?
Well, as you'll notice from the two major areas are underspend. One is on my office because we've gone to great lengths, given some of the financial challenges that we face, and we did some restructuring in our office, and sadly some good people left us. But actually that was with a view to make sure that should there be any kind of financial pressures that we could help to mitigate them. Some of that also comes as a consequence of kind of COVID on both levels to try and make sure that COVID meant that we kind of couldn't mitigate it. And if we didn't need to spend it, we were deliberately hanging on to it because of some of the financial uncertainties. I actually think a lot of the money you've highlighted there, we expect most of it to actually be able to kind of recoup it for the large majority of it. And actually any underspend, we set aside, Ellen will correct me, something like an additional, our expected amount is additional £500,000 to kind of protect the force against kind of anything. So we put some stuff into reserve to make sure it didn't compromise some of the work that we've been doing. We're trying to make sure, we've recruited by the end of this financial year an extra 200 police officers over the last 4.5 years, on our way to over 1,500. I kind of want to do everything I can to make sure that we protect that, but at the same time being very kind of prudent. So also in some of the bits that we've got there, some very robust conversations going on the force about, from a capital program point of view, do we really need to replace that? You've got some major IT projects. We know IT, and I'm a big fan of it, brings some efficiencies. We need to make sure that we spend it wisely. In the end, all of our money needs to be spent on making sure that the people of Northamptonshire are genuinely safer. And I don't underestimate, and part of the reason I would welcome your thoughts at the session that Helen proposes to run in the middle of January. This is an unprecedented year when you've actually got a situation whereby, the people of Northamptonshire have got some real tough financial situation themselves. But also, I don't want to make sure that the force kind of goes backwards in some of the foundations that we've kind of had to lay. So we've kind of just very, very kind of careful with that.
Stephen, the Home Office have indicated that they would participate to 75% of the shortfall of the council tax for Northants. And what I want to know is that on all of the reading for the medium-term financial position, it has been expressed in various paragraphs, the huge problems, despite the fact that she has prepared worst, best kind of scenario. On the page 79, 21, 22 in the medium-term financial position, on paragraph 6.3, she said that, however, even with this, the impact of funding on top of the pressure, which had already been identified, together with the impact of the police uplift program, has indicated provisional shortfall in a budget for 21, 22 and future years. So I am very concerned also with the statement once again of the Home Office regarding public sector pay frozen and what's going to happen, because Helen expressed in her budget statement that even for the current employees, she didn't know how sustainable is going to be over the 22-23.
Wow, a lot in that. So let's just start from a high level and try and kind of make it specific to kind of Northamptonshire. the government's been it hasn't defined for us yet the guaranteed financial settlement. What we believe to be the case, and indications are at this moment, is that PCCs will have latitude to go up to £15, which, should I do so, would be 5.88%. That in large part would mitigate any shortfalls in the current financial year and would go into the base budget. They are still committed to the 20,000 police officers. So if you like, the growth that we've currently achieved is a small mixture of central government, but largely from local taxpayers. Beyond that, there is still, from the 1367 was made up, and Helen will correct me if she get off of mute, we're expecting something like, I think it's 76 and 57 over subsequent years. Now, we will be taking the decision, and haven't taken it yet, in conjunction with the chief, that we will aim for the 76 police officers still next year, because they would still come in at the end. I'm awaiting confirmation from the Home Office that they wouldn't penalise us in a subsequent year. So actually, we would get, given broadly we are, she would tell me the right number, but it doesn't look like she can join us right now. It's something like 0.9 something of a percent we are of the overall national budget. So 400, I think it's 400 million has been allocated for the uplift of 6,000 police officers. For those of you who've quickly done some numbers, that equates to £67,000 per officer. Now, that actually, of course, allows in terms of equipment and other things like that. So actually, it probably covers our cost in the next financial year, but there are additional financial pressures as the kind of force evolves. And I've given them stuff around savings targets, not for saving's sake, but actually as part of it, make sure that they're repurposing and preparing for the future. Because I think the burden on local taxpayers is kind of at a high level. We're already in the top quartile in the country. And I want to reiterate, I genuinely believe that we should be getting more of the kind of central government grant. And I use as an example, as I was using the other day, I know some of you are bored of hearing it, but actually if you look in Northumbria, they spend £800 per head of population on policing. In this county, we spend £564. So actually, and a lot, they only get 18% of their money from local tax. We get 44% of our money from local tax. That just gives you some idea of the unfairness of kind of the grant here. But I will be left with the very difficult decision that says, do you raise the council tax? And it will be somewhere between the 1.99 and the 5.88 that I'll actually be bringing in, because those are the kind of the two limits. We've still some work to do in terms of bringing those bits there. I am concerned about it, and it makes the decision even more difficult. Do I not do the right thing to keep the people of Northamptonshire safer by going lower, but risk the sustainability of kind of Northamptonshire police? I don't believe that the people of Northamptonshire would thank me for that. But at the same time, I've got a consultation that we're launching. I wish to listen to the people of the public, and I shall be bringing that all to you. I've got no fixed opinion yet, but I will do I will do the right thing to make sure the people of Northamptonshire are as safe as they can be, but also in the most cost-effective way. So we're also looking hard to make sure, on the money, are we spending it as wisely as we can in all the places that we are? And that means we have to have a look at some of the things and the places that we put it. Northamptonshire Police, when I started, inherited a budget, Chief Constable had a budget of £110 million. Broadly, he'll have one of it in excess of £140 million next year. So there has been a significant investment, but actually, of course, people want more neighbourhood policing. They want those bits to kind of keep them safe. And it's kind of that right element in terms of making sure it's a bit. And that's partly why I want to have the session with you to kind of, I value your input, your counsel, for us to kind of look at some of the challenges we're facing.
Stephen, you
Since
said
Helen's back, I just agreed to that extra million you asked me for, Mrs. Shields.
I'm back, Commissioner,
Oh, there she
just
is.
in
Oh,
time.
flipped, yes.
you said yes. Have you yet received the police settlement?
No.
Because it says on a report it will be known in December.
Yeah, we expect it next week.
Ah.
And I say expecting next week, whether we get it next week, it continues to be quite a fluid situation at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Can I just refer members to James has just sent out the slides that came to the conference. The one by Grant Thornton had a very interesting chart in it. It showed all the different authorities in the country and how much they got in, or they used precept or had government funding for. And you'll see where we are, as Stephen said, within the top quartile, where we have more precept, which is probably it was because we don't get sufficient government money. But it really brings home when you see the levels of the other authorities. So I would suggest you have a look at that because it gives you a good background.
If James was showing off, Council Chairman, he could flash it up on the screen for us all to see. Only because I've not seen it myself. So,
okay.
Chair, I think Councillor Pritchard's been trying to get in for a while.
Yes. So I'm coming back to Councillor Pritchard. Yes, I just wanted to get in before we left that point. Yes, Ken.
A question, when you look about and you talk about budget setting for next year and so on, what impact or what problems have you had? Because when you think of it, the new unitaries haven't agreed their budget yet, and they're still in that, shall we say, a relatively early stage of actually formulating and agreeing these budgets. What impact is it going to have upon your spend?
Well, at this moment in time, we've been, part of the reason that we always anticipated next year to be challenging. So as we've gone through this year, hence some of the underspends, we've gone out of our way to make sure if we didn't need to spend it, that we didn't. So hence, both myself, the force, and the fire service have tried to do that from a prudent point of view. The public finances in its totality, I don't need to, furlough, all those things cost an awful lot of money, and I think I don't want to look at the graphs that kind of show kind of the kind of jump in kind of expenditure and kind of debt. It does absolutely, and it will be a challenging, and probably one of the most difficult decisions I've had to make around precept at the moment in time that I'm kind of looking like. But on some levels, we've come an awful long way. You've started to see the benefit of that in terms of performance for the force. It would really be quite a tragedy to kind of pull the rug from it. But I have to balance that with, as Mr. Shields talked about, there is some concern around kind of collection rates and what that might or might not look like. People are genuinely terrified about how they're going to pay their rent, their mortgage, and their bills. And I've got to try and balance kind of all of that. Potentially also at the same time that we have a particularly unique situation here in Northamptonshire, where with the forming of the two new authorities, you've got council tax equalisation that's going to be going on. It really isn't a kind of an easy situation. I actually think the public will get a benefit, I think, in the longer run from instead of an 8 and 2. I don't want to get into a political, but I worry a little bit that you kind of growing of parish councils that are kind of adding to kind of people's budgets as well. Now, I'm not saying they aren't worthy things, but actually, is some of these things, is now the right time for some of those? So I think that it's a really, really kind of challenging environment. The good thing is, I actually think Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue and Police, as much as I can do within the remit that I've got, is better placed. Some of the stuff that we've started to do around kind of joint estates, we've just hired a new joint head of a fleet. Though I actually think that we'll actually start to be the recipient of some of those. And I'm not really looking for cost savings, but efficiencies. So more, you can't add 200 extra police officers and extra firefighters and actually not have vehicles that they can kind of get around in. We've got more single crewing than we've had before, which kind of gives us faster response time. But actually, you need them to kind of converge if there's a serious incident. So a lot of those bits, and more so than ever before, the kind of police and the fire family, it's not just about firefighters and police officers. It's about the people that also work and support them. So I think because we've made some of those decisions, we're actually genuinely in a better place. But I'm not looking forward to, I shall take all the Christmas cheer that I can. I shall listen to the public. I shall take a stiff drink, and we'll be making some very difficult decisions. And I think you'll have some robust challenge of the decisions that I need to make when we announce that precept in terms of things. So
you will be able to finalise your budget, even though the unitaries haven't finalised their budgets.
Well, in fairness, how can I put it? I actually, by law, I actually have to set mine before they set theirs anyway. If only I had the time to, as long as them. I suppose in many respects, I probably have more known unknowns than some of the kind of others. If I kind of look back at my time in this office, I remember the first budget I ever tried to set. One of the challenges for me was I actually tried to set it, and I sat in the first meeting, and basically I got everyone in a room and locked the door and said, no one's leaving until we set this budget. Might sound a bit draconian to a chief constable, chief fire, and all those, but you know what? No one could agree what the actual numbers were. My office couldn't agree with the force. The good thing is now we have one version of the truth. People actually understand it, and some great work by Helen, our finance team. One of the things we've managed to do is we brought our finance teams. There is one finance team across police and fire. That means that they're looking at those kind of opportunities. It also means you can quite frankly afford, we used to share some of our finance team in the policing with Leicestershire. Well, actually, we never got our real kind of fair share of that. So actually a lot of what I would say are really boring stuff that we never really shout about have laid some firm foundations, and God am I glad we made some of those decisions over the last couple of years. It won't be easy, but I suppose I also want to be reassuring. I have a difficult decision to make. We're not on a cliff edge. We're not coming to say, ironically, I think the policing budget is in a better position than the fire budget. If you look at, I don't know what graphs you've kind of got, but actually in terms of funding and reserves, Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue is by far the bottom. I think there was a recent bit come out, and I'm hoping Mrs. King will come off mute to confirm my numbers, but I think it was something like our reserves are a kind of 7, 8, 9%, and the net, and that was us bottom, and the one above it was something like 19. The average across the fire sector is something like 39% of actually reserves that have kind of built up in time. We kind of don't have that luxury. So a lot of work, some great work, to be honest, between Helen and Darren Dovey in conjunction with the Home Office, is hopefully we will extract some more money, shall we say, from them to provide some more financial resilience. And sadly, that we'll also have to ask them that will they give me the latitude to go in the same way to the £5 for fire and rescue, because then it'd go into the base budget and would generate something like £950,000, which would make a world of difference to their financial future. So I'm actually, I have a lot of unknowns, but I suppose the good thing is because of the work we've done, we actually really know our numbers and we're able to articulate what that means. And on the back of that, I'm confident that we, on the fire and rescue, I know the Home Office really understands the challenge that we've got on the fire and rescue service. On the policing one, it's got to be a healthy balance between prudence and the burden they ask the taxpayer for. And I don't relish the decision that I need to make in that sense.
Councillor Jelly,
what I'm elected to do.
You wanted to come in on the budget.
Yeah, Chair, and just to pick up on what Ken said about budgets for the unitary, just to let you know, I delivered the draft budget for the North to the Shadow Executive on Monday of this week, and we actually go out for public consultation tomorrow and that runs through until the 29th of January. Then we would take note of all of the comments from the consultation and finally deliver our final budget, which is the 25th of February. That's at full council on 25th of February.
Mrs. King, wish you got as long as that. Now, we have tried to be very innovative. So I have got a speakerphone that I've pretty much attached to my computer. You can't see her, or I'll wave her around. This is Mrs. King. So she is here. So forgive us if the connection isn't great, but we've come up with an innovative way that she can hear. So all those monetary promises I made in her absence, I can't stick to anymore. All right.
Yeah, well, unfortunately,
I would.
Helen's in and out like a jack in the box.
Helen's trying to say something. Hang on just one second. Tell me if you can hear her or not. I'm turning you up and thing on thing. Go ahead, Helen.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephen. I'm really sorry, everybody. The entire house has been kicked out of all connections, so I do apologise. As Stephen highlighted, we have done a lot of work very early on in the medium-term plans for both fire and police, which meant that we have been able to, at a very early stage on fire, raise this with the Home Office. They have been extremely open in the conversation. They understand the challenges and they want to support us as best as they can. We realise that we won't find out any detail until next week with the settlement, but we have done an awful lot of work with our fire colleagues. We will be able to produce a balanced budget for next year. That is, without a doubt, but it's the difference between it being very, very tight and very challenging. And if there is some additional funding, either in the base or if Stephen has to increase on the precept, then that will make a huge difference. But I can give the panel great confidence that the fire service have, rolled up their sleeves and worked with us very closely on this challenge. They're very good at eking out every single penny to make it work, and they're very good at giving us the information and the messages to push with the Home Office and with ministers to try and get a sensible settlement for Northamptonshire Fire. So that's where we are on the fire side. On policing, similarly, we have modelled numbers, we have highlighted challenges. However, policing are in a much better place. They do have the reserves to help smooth our impacts over the next few years if things are really tight. That's the difference between fire and policing. Fire do not have the reserves to really help that just yet. They're in a much better place than they ever were, but they're not quite in the sustained place that they would have been in another year or two. I hope that gives you a bit more background and a bit more confidence that we're doing a lot of work at the moment and we're very on top of the numbers. Is there anything else?
That was very helpful, Helen.
Can you hear that okay?
Yes, very
okay,
well.
cool.
Yeah.
We've done well. We've managed to budget together.
Innovative. It's a bit of struggle with Helen in and out. Well, I don't see any other hands up. So, James, we just need to note the proposal, the budget update, and we'll look forward to the working group to go through the budget in more detail in the new year. And
take me through my pain.
And thence to the.
I'm really looking forward to that, Claire. Yes. Thank you, members.
Good. Yes. Well, thank you for agreeing to that, because it's really going to help, I think, give members an understanding of what the challenges are, etc. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I will have my fellow colleagues. I will have Vaughan Ashcroft, the Section 151 officer from the force, with me. And I will have Nick Alexander, the Joint Head of Finance, who's worked very closely on the fire as well. So members at the workshop will have a good rounded discussion between us. It's an opportunity that we don't often get to get all of those people together. So yes, we're very much looking forward to it. Thank you.
And just on that, I think this obviously, you know, you'd got some bits there. We want to try and make sure that we continue to. I've always been very appreciative of the constructive challenge that I've received from the panel, and we've gone out of our way to make sure that we can give you as much time and as briefing as you can allow us to in your very valuable time. I'm hoping this is a real opportunity for us to kind of build on that kind of budgetary and becomes a kind of an annual process that you can kind of be part of, because I think it helps to kind of inform the role of the Commissioner. So thank you in advance.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go on now to the report of the working group. You've got the report in front of you and the recommendations. I don't know whether you need me to go through it in detail, but basically there are two aspects to it. One for different ways of working, and another to do with the unitary and how the panel works in the future in terms of the unitary. So in terms of the panel working, we've suggested having pre-meetings, which we had before, and just perhaps about half an hour, we thought, just to go over a few things before we start the meetings. A means of having questions that could be sent in. A couple of people have done that this time, have perhaps sent me questions, but we need to perhaps, James might come up with a way that could work in practice. We need to formalise that. Having member champions is something that was mentioned once before. Sorry about that. Somebody printing my printer next to me. Sorry. Sorry, my husband decided to print on the printer next to me. It was an accident, apparently. Member champions, we thought was a good idea, but we thought that in view of the fact that it would be members' interests and knowledge, that would be better to bring in once the new membership comes into play, since it would. But it could perhaps be related to items on the police and crime plan, to do with the budgets. We've already heard about that, how we could work with the Commissioner, and we really appreciate his agreement to us having a little group that meets on that. The thing with that is that we need to obviously work out who is going to be on that. Consideration for way members can report back to their local authorities and links with community safety partnerships, and also ways of us transferring knowledge from this panel to future. I don't know whether anyone's got any questions. I'll go on to the local authority bit in a minute, but has anyone got any comments on agreement, disagreement of any of those items? Councillor Jelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just a thought, actually, because I did speak to Lisa Hyde, who's the, excuse me, the Transformation Director for the North, and she's been working with her colleague in the West, because we needed to discuss who was going to host this meeting when we get into unitary, whether it was the North or the West. Is it worth...
I'm glad someone was worried about that, because I was.
Well, I know they're working on it. I mean, is it worth giving a copy of this to the two Transformation Directors?
Yes, that would certainly be possible. I mean, yeah. That was the thing we're going to come on to in a minute with the unitary. Yeah. But
I mean, if you're happy for that, I'll make sure they go.
It's a public document anyway, so
yes, yeah,
that's no problem.
Okay, yes. All right, I'll do that.
Yeah. So if no one's got any burning things on that for the minute, I'll go on to the unitary. And certainly we've said about who's going to host, which we don't have any particular feelings one way or another, but said it needs to be decided. we did suggest that, as there were 10 councillors needed on a body by law, that's in the Act, that it would be split 50-50, so 5 from the north, 5 from the west, and that we would encourage both new councils to have regard to what's called the balanced appointment objective, which basically means you have different areas of the county all represented. So you have people from Northampton and Daventry and Wellingborough, etc. So it's not just everyone from one particular area. Of course, and political balance, obviously, as well. And that notice that the authorities that we would need some sort of web presence, and could they just think about that, and appropriate training. So, I think we covered quite a lot of the areas. Richard, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I missed that meeting. I must have come up, I can't remember. But with regard to, I don't think we can just split it down the middle with regard to representation.
No, Richard, you were at that meeting.
Yeah, well, I don't recall that conversation. But with regard to, I'm just wondering from a democratic purpose, is there anything significant with the populations that would indicate that we should have more in the west than the north? If not, I'm quite content with the halfway, but it's about representing the people, isn't it? So it's got to have some sort of proportionality to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. In section 5.3, James has outlined there the population. So the two populations, I think it probably works out to 4.5 to 5.5, but we don't know quite how you're going to cut somebody in half.
Oh, right, does it? So I'm just wondering, democratically, there's nothing significant in that, and we'd be quite liberty to that. Sorry, it's a question for Democratic Services.
James.
We'd be quite at liberty to have 5 and 5 then.
Yes, is the short answer.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with that.
I mean,
we also looked at Dorset and Wiltshire and their experience and how they'd split on sort of if there is a big discrepancy in the population, obviously that takes sway, but we didn't feel it was so far apart that
I think it's about what we feel. It's about what's democratically right, really. And
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, it's only a recommendation after all. But the authorities are.
Through you, Chair, to expand slightly, although some of this is covered in the relevant section of the report. There's quite a lot of flexibility, really, to decide future membership locally, in the sense that the panel will have to have 10 councillor members, and there has to be at least one councillor member from each of the authorities in the force area. Beyond that, it's for the local authorities to decide what are referred to as the extra members are, who appoints those. Where the situation will get more interesting in Northamptonshire after the 1st of April is because you'll only have the 2 local authorities. So as things stand, the panel had to have 10 councillor members. There are 8 local authorities in the county, so that left the existing authorities to decide, well, which of the authorities provide the 2 extra members, and it was decided that one of those would come from a Northamptonshire County Council, one of those would come from Northampton Borough Council. The more interesting situation will be because after 1st of April will be because you get the bigger difference between one from each of the local authorities only produces 10 members, which leaves you with 8 extra members to decide how they're allocated. I think, as you've highlighted, the panel couldn't see any grounds for deciding other than a 5-5 split, which is perfectly possible within the legal requirements.
Richard, did you want to come back, or are you still got your
No, that's fine. Only bearing in mind that I will have to face up to the executive on the West, and I just wanted to make sure that what we came to was democratically fine, and I'm quite happy to pursue that if that's what the group wanted.
Yeah. James, can I just say, was it 10 or was it 10? Could it be 11 or what? In the
well, no. So when the legislation says that when you have a police fire and crime panel for a police area that covers fewer than 10 local authorities, the panel must have a councillor membership of 10. So you'll find two different sorts of panels in relation to councillor membership. The ones like Thames Valley, for example, where it covers quite more than 10 local authorities, there will be one councillor member on the panel from each of the local authorities. The other sort, which applies to Northamptonshire now and will apply to it after the 1st of April next year, is where you have a panel for a force area that includes fewer than 10 local authorities, in which case it's one councillor member from each of the local authorities, and the remaining councillor members needed to get to you up to the minimum of 10. It's for the local authorities to decide how those are allocated. And that's the crucial point to pick up on Councillor Auger's last comment. What the panel is thinking about here is purely a recommendation from the panel to the powers that be as to how that allocation of councillor members may be dealt with after the 1st of April next year. It will be for the new unitary authorities to decide between themselves what that allocation actually is. So if the panel recommends it should be 5 and 5, the new unitary authorities may agree with that. They may decide on a different approach. It will be, but if they decide on a different approach, that's their decision to make. What the panel is saying isn't binding. It's merely something that may inform the decision makers.
I think it's important that if we're going to have a recommendation, that we go back to our shadow authorities that we sing from the same hymn sheet. My only concern was to ensure that I'm not a representative of the borough, but they do have a lot of people living there, that they have 2 representatives. And then, of course, there's 3 sort of rural, there's Daventry and South Northants. As long as they've got a representative, then, of course, we can then decide where the 5th person goes. So I think we've got plenty, and I'm quite happy that I can fight the corner in saying that it's democratically appropriate. So thank you for that.
Councillor Pritchard.
As I say, I think my only concern is what we must ensure, and obviously from a local perspective, is that rural representation must be situated, must actually have some sort of voice into this, because obviously when you look at the West and when you look at the North, in the West we have 60,000 more inhabitants, and obviously that would be focused around the urban areas. I just want to make sure that from a rural perspective, we do have that representation.
Yeah. Councillor Jelly. I know
thank you.
Several you have to leave, so.
Yeah, I agree with Richard, actually. I'll take this message back to the shadow executive in the North. And I'll make that point with the transformation directors, that this will be a decision that'll have to be made when they get to unitary.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. So, James, did we need to take a vote on this?
Well, it doesn't. It can be dealt with in the standard way. If there's the general assent of the meeting, and if that can be indicated, then that's fine. Right. I mean, what I was going to say was, if you with a piece of work like this, when you appoint a working group to look at a specific topic and to produce a report back to the panel, you'd always hope to avoid a situation where the panel or the committee having the report back, crayons over everything that its subgroup has done and tries to rewrite it at the last minute. Given that you can't rewrite in 30 minutes something that's may have been done across several meetings in a period of time. Having said that, anything that goes forward from the panel needs to be something that the panel is happy with. It's not obligated to agree with the views of the working group just because the working group has done the work. So if there is a concern about this specific recommendation about a 5-5 split, then the panel is not obligated to go forward with that if members would prefer not to. It could comment on how a split might be made in future without making a recommendation on that if members would prefer that as an approach. Anything that comes from that goes to the shadow authorities or to the transformation directors from the panel after this meeting needs to be something that the panel is happy with.
I think, James, the panel, if I remember rightly, was mostly people that are here anyway. So, we've already gone through it quite a lot. Is there any strong feeling that we shouldn't support this as it is? Winston, you weren't on the panel.
No, Chair, I can't understand how you can defranchise 60,000 people.
I'm not sure it's defranchising. It's more a case of saying there has to be 10. You have to have one from the west and one from the north. And it's a case of the other 8 have to be split in some way or other between 2 authorities, one of which has got 3 current authorities and one has got 4. And that's always going to be difficult because that's 7, and if there's 8 members, you can't even have one from each of the 7. So it's always going to be difficult to. It's not going to be one per authority in future. It might be, so for instance, Northampton would get 2 because they're so much bigger, and that's how it's been so far.
I'm sorry, I have to leave. I've got another meeting to go to.
Yeah.
Christmas, everybody. Hope you have a good Christmas.
Are you happy with the report as it is, Ian?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
You can? Yeah.
Yes, I also have to leave as well. And also very, very quickly, could I thank James for actually putting that report together. Actually, it was it came out incredibly well and also looked very professional.
Thank you.
Yeah, Winston, with regard to Northampton, that will be a West issue. I'm quite comfortable in advising whoever will be in power there, or giving that there should be 2 representatives. Obviously, it won't be my decision, but I think the big borough should have 2 just simply because of all the people there, and then that will then leave 3 others to cover the rural area, which it's up to other people, but that's I think that would be.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got a foggiest idea who is going to be on the panel, but I'm just saying that wherever that 60,000 is, certainly Northampton, it's got a hell of a lot more people than anywhere else. But I'm not just thinking about Northampton. I think overall, north and south, you got 60,000 people more in the south.
West.
In the west, yeah. So
that was my concern, Winston. But I think if it's not statistically, or if it's not undemocratic, then we can't go into halves, and I wouldn't want to get in a bun fight over it if we can do it that way. But it will be up to the leaders to decide at the end of the day. It sounds like a reasonable split, and we're doing things which are quite lawfully and acceptable. So,
James wanted to say, oh yeah, there you are, James. You wanted to say something.
A couple of things, Chairman. First one is the practical point that the quorum for panel meetings is 5 members. We're on 6 at the moment, so It's starting to get a bit tighter than we would like. Hopefully no one else will need to leave before we finish. Yeah. And then on this question of the councillor membership, I think what the work to hopefully not put words in your mouth that you disagree with. I think what the working group was saying was it was recommending five from the north, 5 from the west, on the basis that the populations of the two unitaries are not sufficiently different that you could argue for another allocation. I mean, the next obvious one would be 6 members to one and 4 to the other. You know, it's accepted. It's obvious that the West has a bigger population, but not so much bigger that you could go 6-4 rather than 5-5. And what I think, and then what will be some protection as well is the working group's recommendation about the new unitary authorities having regard to the balanced appointment objective. In a sense, that recommendation is asking the new unitary authorities to do something that they would be legally required to do anyway. So the legislation that sets up police and crime panels and says how they'll operate includes this requirement, the balanced appointment objective, which sets some parameters for how councillor members should be appointed, which are precisely designed to give panels to help panel memberships to represent all of the authorities in the area and the political makeup of the authorities, and to give panels a membership that gives them the skills, knowledge and expertise to enable them to do their jobs effectively. So almost whatever might be decided in Northamptonshire, the local authorities will have to have regard to this legal requirement about how the panel is composed in future.
James, we've only got 5 members on the panel at the moment.
We have only 5, yeah, but we're 5 is the core, it says.
Oh, is it?
Sorry, the managing officer.
Sorry. 5.
Sorry, just trying to unmute. One additional thing that could be done is both of the chief executives are now in post. So there's no reason why we can't inform them after this meeting that this issue has come up and the details of the discussion, so that it's on their minds already, so that when it comes up as part of the shadow or future discussions, they're aware of it. They're aware of the concerns of this panel.
Yeah,
is there a political issue or an officer issue, the number?
It'll ultimately need to be the subject of a democratic decision.
So political?
Yes.
Okay.
I think, that's why we set up the working group, was because we wanted to bring it to their attention. And as Ian Jelly said before he left, that he suggested this be handed to the 2 transformation directors. Mm-hmm. And obviously they'll bring it into the chief executives as well, to say that there's an issue that will need to be decided. It will be the decision of the 2 unitaries. This is a recommendation, but they don't have to follow it.
Yes, exactly. And as a matter of kind of note forward taking after these meetings, it's something that James and I would do anyway, that if something does come up that is of note, we would normally let them know about it so that they're aware, so it's kind of on their radar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So is everyone happy that it sort of goes forward on that basis, that it will be highlighted to the 2 chief executives and the 2 transformation directors, and the decision will be up to the 2 unitaries? It's not our decision to make. Is everyone happy with the other suggestions for future panel? The only thing, I think there was one where we had to determine the membership of the finance budget group, James. Would you like to? I mean, I'd like to be on it, but and other members here can say they want as well.
Sorry,
but otherwise,
sorry.
because there's quite a lot, I think not here. Then I think it'd be best if perhaps you sent an email out.
Certainly, you're shading into the work programme item here. Just before we move off the panel operation working group report. So just so I'm clear, is the panel agreeing the recommendation as it is here, that it wants to recommend the split should be 5-5?
I wouldn't support it, James.
Okay, or is it agreeing that it wants to relay the panel the thinking about what the need for the split to be decided and what that split might be, but the panel to the shadow authorities, but the panel itself is making no recommendation about how the councillor membership might be allocated. Either is fine.
I go with the latter, what you've just said there. But it's up to the members, because I'm a vote. It don't really matter, because the two authorities is going to be conservative, and they will decide anyway. But I'm just making the point because I'm a Democrat. I don't see how we could just defranchise 60,000 people. It's a lot of.
But do you think it should be 6-4 then, Winston?
No, I'm not.
That's the problem.
I can't say that.
I think, Chairman, by the sound of it, for everybody to be comfortable, it would be a question of slightly toning down that section of the report, and rather than the panel saying, "We've looked at this. Here are the things we considered, and here is what the panel. Here is a conclusion from the panel to help the final decision by the shadow authorities." Instead of that, the report would just be saying, "Here is some of the thing. Here is what the working group looked at. Here is some of the things we considered. We're not making any conclusion on it. We're giving you the thinking, and it will be for the shadow authorities to make the decision."
I think that's a good proposal, James.
Yeah.
For somebody who's not a councillor, as an independent.
James, and I think if you identified that 60,000, the feeling that there were 60,000 that felt they weren't covered, that's basically the issue. And then let the new unitary sort it out themselves.
Yeah.
So the shadow authorities are still getting the benefit of the work done by the panel, but the panel members aren't being asked to agree a recommendation on something that they're not entirely comfortable with.
Yeah, that's fair.
Pauline, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yes, I just wanted to say, as part of the working group, the way the discussions went was that we looked at other areas which had a similar setup in terms of population and on the unitary authority. So we looked at it from that perspective. It certainly wasn't kind of done it was almost like looking at it, what is the best approach that we could take as a working group? And as you've said, James, it's just a recommendation from the working group. So it's not like we're saying this is what must be done. Actually, we're just bringing it to your attention that we've had a look at it. We've discussed it as a group, and this is kind of our recommendation in terms of what you're looking at on the unitary. So it's not like it's a done and dusted decision. It's still up for discussion wherever it goes. But your point taken on the last point.
No,
I mean, the working group essentially didn't vote. That's it. This is casting like, the Bible. This is, it was a debate based on various models that was presented to the group. We look at it, as you say, Pauline, and we thought, okay, as a starting point, this seemed to be okay, half-half, but by no means is the end of the debate. It is up to the two unitary to put their point of view forward on the basis of the working group proposal, because it's only a proposal. And I think the last comment that James has put forward should be the basis for further discussion.
Yeah, so
if you word it that the working group proposed this, the discussion at the panel, there was some disagreement on that, but it was felt that at the end of the day, it will be resolved by the unitaries. It's not our decision, and there were you needed to take into account the different populations, and to make sure that each area, we were most concerned that each area had representation, and that larger areas such as Northampton would probably warrant a greater representation than other areas. But at the same time, as Councillor Pritchard said, that the rural areas were still represented.
Yeah, the unitaries will have the pleasure of deciding all this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like the words of pleasure.
so just in conclusion, the panel is happy with all of the recommendations in the report, except for that one around a 5-5 split, and that will be amended as the chairman has just summarised.
Do you want to run that past me, James, before you sort of publish that? I'd said about the membership of that budget group, you think that's more in the working programme?
Yeah, I think that would be sensible to pick that up there.
So are we okay to go on to the working programme then?
Yes.
Everyone happy with the other recommendations we made? And James, you will need to come up with some sort of procedure for questions, please.
Yeah.
That's more a practical sort of everyday type thing. Well, on the working programme, you've got that. Basically, the main statutory functions on the working programme, and James has then outlined several things after that. Do you want to cover that, James?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So it's the standard report. Hopefully a thoroughly familiar format to members. Pick up a couple of points, one arising from this meeting, one not. So the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner has made the offer to invite the panel to form a subgroup to be involved in work on the budget during January. I take it that the panel is happy to agrees that offer, wants to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
so,
our recommendation in the first place.
And you'd already said, I think, given the number of members present now and not present, I think it would be appropriate to canvass all members after today's meeting about their interest in that. We would be talking about an identified subgroup rather than a briefing session involving all panel members. So I think you'd be looking at a subgroup of, we usually go for odd numbers, so say 5 members. So yeah. It would be for an identified group rather than the full membership. I mean, would the panel be happy to delegate authority to the chair and deputy chair to approve the final membership, given we'll need to do that between meetings? And
because it's possible we might have, more than 5, put their names forward, and we will need to keep it to a reasonable amount. We might be able to create to sort of 6 or 7, but you don't want to have too large a group.
Yeah.
But,
so I'll circulate the panel membership for interest in that.
When would that be, James? The date in January?
Well, the commissioner and his office are suggesting the 14th of January as a date that would work for them.
Okay.
Ideally.
James, have you got any thoughts on what a good number would be? Because 6 or 7 sounds almost like what we've got now, if not more.
No,
I'm just because that's not my area of expertise. They're a great, Anita and Jill are more familiar with budgets than that. So what would be a good number? And we'll be quite.
The rule of thumb I'd work to for this kind of thing, councillor, is no fewer than 5 and no more than 7 in this case.
Right.
Anything below 5 and it starts to get a bit too small to be representative. Yeah. Anything more than 7 and you start to think, well, this is the whole panel virtually.
Yeah.
I think if you look at, say, the working group we had for the other work, we had 5, and I think we have 5 on several other working groups. So that's
5 sounds like a good number, and it means that little group can go deep dive into it without having massive debates and that. So
okay, and then the other point I wanted to raise, Chair, was there was a resolution from the September panel meeting that the panel would agree to give further consideration to the performance information that is presented to it in future following this morning's briefing session. And just a couple of thoughts on that. Firstly, that may not be something that you want to decide now, given that there's only a relatively small number of panel members still present. And on the other hand, the commissioners presented a revised form of the police and crime plan delivery update to the meeting today. The panel may have a view about whether that meets the need it previously decided it wanted to consider.
Well, I'm quite happy to, keep to what we. Oh, Stephen.
I'm still here. I think what I'm proposing for you in your thinking, that I think for each chief officer, as in chief constable, chief fire officer, that we at least put in kind of an annual briefing, because I think actually I've always said I want to make sure that we're open, but also it gives the opportunity to kind of share. So I continue to make that offer that there's kind of an annual, and we can vary the content, but if you had kind of a principle, we can make sure that we kind of got an annual piece that we can kind of, off camera and there will continue to always be specialist areas that will provide additional briefings to. But I think particularly annually, I think would make a lot of sense.
Chair, can I just add to that? I think you're right, Stephen. I know technically we're making you, well, not technically, we are we make you accountable to make the chief accountable. But that, like this morning, it's so useful to really get into, because that's what I think politicians and representatives like, is actually to get into the reality of the crime and how we're doing as a police force. And I thought this morning was a real success, and it'd be loved to be repeated on an annual basis if possible.
I agree.
No problem.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Is everyone else happy to leave it at that? Just do an annual sort of briefing.
That's fine, Chair.
Where we can have a deep dive into the current statistics, etc.
And if it's all right with you, it's my intention, because obviously I cover a lot of areas, as we continue to kind of develop the thing, I'd ask you to think in your work, and obviously it's your agenda, not mine, that if you like almost a 20-minute, half an hour at tops kind of briefing, and I'm happy to be cut down a little bit, that we'll build on some of the different elements. I probably could provide you with a schedule for the next 3 years of kind of different areas, particularly of things that kind of build on in knowledge. I know you know about voice, but actually just that half an hour gives you a bit more detail. You'll know, yes, you read a bit around kind of the youth report. Well, actually, you know what actually are they doing? What does that look like? And why does that have a kind of effect? Because then it kind of validates, why from a budgetary point of view have I chosen to put those resources in that particular place and area? It makes those kind of things a little bit kind of more holistic. Now that's kind of up to you, but I think we're trying to pick areas, and I'll continue to make proposals of areas that I think are both challenging and or kind of significant areas of investment for you to sort of think that there's a sort of additional briefings, you know.
Okay, all happy with that. So James, is that, we just need to note that you know, we've got things like more detailed plans to deliver the estate strategy, their potential, we haven't got any sort of dates or on that, and the medium-term financial plan in the context of comprehensive spending review. But I think as we're only having a 1-year spending review, that's probably you know, doesn't need to be brought forward at this moment. So is everyone happy with the work plan that we've got? Yep. Any other areas that we think we need to bring forward? It's useful to have those briefings occasionally. Pauline?
Yes, last time when we had the Chief Fire Officer's appointment meeting, we had discussed the possibility of looking at something around supporting the commissioner in his work around succession planning.
Well, I think
recruitment.
The commissioner needed to build in succession planning for the next, it's a 2-year term. I'm not sure the panel was going to be involved with that. I think it was something of a recommendation to the commissioner that he, that's right, yeah, doesn't wait till 2 years before he, you know, thinks about it, assuming he's still the commissioner.
If you don't mind me saying, I ain't gonna
commissioner.
I ain't thank Winston. Yeah, I'm gonna re-recording these endorsements from you.
Yes, record them.
Thanks. I think it is something I've had conversations, because of course I don't want to undermine Darren, because actually they're his staff and he's got 2 people in terms of things. We actually have had conversations with it and what can kind of be done. So that is in hand about areas that we think they've got development on that basis. But it probably is one that I should come and give you my thoughts, and that might be that's probably not one I won't do in public for obvious reasons, but in the middle of next year we can have a chat about that one.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's
if I may, I'm going to excuse myself.
I think we are now finished, Stephen. Okay. So nice to see you, and happy Christmas.
Yes, and thank you all of you for your support this year. Like I said, we'll have some difficult and challenging conversations in the new year around money, but everyone have a safe, and I hope you get to see as much as your friends and family as the kind of law safely allows us all.
The COVID allows.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks very much. So I think, James,
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Cheers.
Are we finished now, or we do just need to note this? And I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance, and hope, as Stephen said, you have a pleasant Christmas and a good New Year as well, as much as you can.
Thank you very much, Jill.
Excellent, thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you.
Jill.